Chapter 56-79. Kong Shinmu's perception was also sealed, but he could still sense the power from the 7 devouring demon sealing art. However, the moment he received Fengling's message, Kong Shinmu had already devoured this seemingly tiny dead spirit flame. After devouring this undead spirit aura, even the devouring power had a layer of faint, cold flames. Kong Shinmu also knew that Fengling seemed to be helping him now, but it was only because he had value. After all, he had only obtained the power of 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, and had not obtained Fengling's approval. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to obtain Fengling's approval, so he had to become stronger. Whether it was the dead spirit clan of the 4 great corpse progenitor clans, or the Otherworld clan members who were fighting with the divine light, they all came from the Otherworld. The 8 God Star plate that Kong Shinmu had was a special summoning contract instrument, and under the circumstances that it had lost its base, he had already signed contracts with 5 living beings. If he could find the base of the 8 God Star plate, perhaps he could sign more living beings. Just like the armor that Leng Zhonghong had. The dead spirit flame was essentially a type of flame, and Kong Shinmu happened to have the power of the supreme divine fire, so it corresponded to it. It was with this mentality that Kong Shinmu tried to devour the dead spirit flame. Not only this dead spirit flame, but he also wanted to devour all the dead spirit flames in the prison that trapped him. However, the attribute of the dead spirit flame was different from other flames, as it was the opposite of hot and cold. After devouring the dead spirit flame, Kong Shinmu encountered some trouble when he was refining it because of this dual attribute. Although it was a little troublesome, it was not impossible to refine it, but the process might take a long time. Kong Shinmu was not in a hurry to refine the dead spirit flame that he had devoured. Leng Zhonghong was also a little surprised to see Kong Shinmu devour his dead spirit flame. Power that did not belong to you should not be used casually. Even after fighting for half a day, they still couldn't destroy Kong Shinmu's soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. Now, this kid actually took the initiative to devour the death spirit chi flame. He was simply courting death. What Leng Zhonghong was thinking, or what he was saying, Kong Shinmu was completely unclear. After sealing his senses, Kong Shinmu sensed that the binding force that was obstructing the devouring force seemed to have weakened. He even had a feeling that the devouring power would appear wherever he wanted it to. This feeling was not groundless. At the critical moment just now, when Kong Shinmu withdrew his devouring power, he suddenly appeared behind him. After devouring the undead aura behind him, Kong Shinmu turned his attention to the prison around him. With a thought, the devouring power suddenly appeared around the prison and enveloped it. The prison sensed the devouring power and started to release its power, trying to control the devouring power. Kong Shinmu could clearly see the constantly changing words on the prison cell. As the words changed, the number of dark green flames above the prison cell increased. As the dark green flames increased, the number of things that looked like eyes above the flames also increased. The entire prison cell was covered with dark green flames, and it looked like many small skulls were gathered together. After the runes changed, the shape of the prison cell also underwent a huge change. It formed the shape of a huge skull. The skull formed by the undead aura opened its big mouth and bit towards Kong Shinmu. The dark green skulls that were coming toward them opened and closed their mouths, biting the people from the other side in half. Kong Shinmu stood still and faced the skull formed by the undead aura head-on. When Leng Zhonghong saw Kong Shinmu's action, he sneered and moved his huge armored body. Waves of dark green flame spread out from his palms. After this dark green flame appeared, Leng Zhonghong's body trembled slightly. Beneath the armor, the ball of flames in Withered Bone's body became weaker. Leng Zhonghong sat cross-legged on the ground and started to chant the ballad again. As he chanted, the dark green flames that he had released suddenly disappeared from this space, and there was no longer any aura left. Crazy! When Fengling saw Kong Shinmu's action, he was also very surprised. If Kong Shinmu died here, it meant that the 7 devouring demon sealing art would be buried here. This space was no longer in the ancient desolate city. After Leng Zhonghong's power dissipated, it was unknown whether he would appear in the other side or return to his original world. Fengling watched as the huge skull swallowed Kong Shinmu's whole body and controlled the 7 devouring demon sealing art. However, at this moment, Fengling suddenly froze. The 7 devouring demon sealing art's inscription actually activated on its own? Very quickly, Fengling understood that the 7 devouring demon sealing art's inscription was influenced by the great 10-directional demon seal, and that was why it was activated. Even though the Great 10-Directional Demon Seal was already activated, it was very difficult for Kong Shinmu to activate the 9 inscription marks again. The Great 10-Directional Demon Seal was equivalent to a natural space, and it could store energy that he was unable to refine and absorb. Kong Shinmu planned to swallow this skull, and then store the dead spirit energy in the Great 10-Directional Demon Seal. The huge skull that emitted dark green flames quickly swallowed Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu increased the devouring power. The devouring power spread out in all directions, covering the entire body of the skull. The moment the devouring power spread out, Lang Chonghong clearly felt that he had lost contact with the skull. No matter how he released the dead spirit energy, he could not feel the existence of the skull. Wherever the dead spirit energy existed, his dead spirit energy could sense the existence of the other party. Forget about the dead spirit energy swallowing Kong Shinmu. Even the dead spirit energy that invaded Kong Shinmu's mind, consciousness, and sea of consciousness were also sensed. Kong Shinmu being able to swallow that dead spirit energy was indeed out of his expectations. But the dead spirit energy contained on this skull was 100 times that of the previous one. What made Kong Shinmu think that he could swallow this power? What surprised Lang Zhonghong was that the moment the devouring power enveloped the skull, he could no longer sense the power of the death flame on the skull. Lang Chonghong had such a thought, and so did Fengling. But Kong Shinmu did not think so. He could swallow the dead spirit energy. Moreover, he not only wanted to swallow the dead spirit energy here, he also wanted to swallow the dead spirit energy that Lang Chonghong possessed. Kong Shinmu controlled the devouring power and swallowed the huge skull at a terrifying speed. This skull was originally formed from the death spirit chi flame, and now that the death spirit chi flame had been devoured, the skull also disappeared. The runes on the skull kept changing, and Kong Shinmu finally saw them clearly. It was the language of the ancient martial country. It was a technique to refine puppets. This made Kong Shinmu confused. The dead spirit energy was essentially a type of flame. Although this flame was a little strange, it seemed to have the characteristics of life. Chapter 5680. Kong Shinmu only knew that it was the flame of undead after he devoured all of the flame of undead on the skull. He compared Lang Zhonghong's puppet sorcery, and noticed that it was slightly different from normal puppet sorcery. The main difference was that normal puppet sorcery could only control the puppet's body. However, Lang Zhonghong's puppet sorcery could not only control the puppet's body, but also the puppet's consciousness. Although it was a puppet, it still had a certain degree of self-awareness, which was mainly reflected in its cultivation level. Take the flame of undead for example. Normal puppet sorcery could only control the flame of undead's effect, but not its intensity. In other words, a cultivator could only use the flame of undead to attack a target, but could not control the power of the flame of undead. Deciding the target's life or death depended on the strength of the cultivator's puppet sorcery. However, Lang Zhonghong was different. Lang Zhonghong's puppet sorcery could not only determine the target of the flame of undead's attack, but it could also allow the flame of undead to unleash its intrinsic power. This was why Lang Zhonghong was only using the puppet sorcery to unleash the flame of undead's power. Kong Shinmu did not expect Lang Zhonghong to raise the flame of undead as a puppet. Of course, this question made Kong Shinmu sink into deep thought. The flame of undead was a type of flame without any life force, so he did not need to use puppet sorcery and could easily control it with a control sorcery. Not only did Lang Zhonghong use puppet sorcery, but he also used an extraordinary puppet sorcery to control the flame of undead. However, he soon got his answer. The flame of undead that was devoured by the devouring power could not be refined by the supreme godly fire like other flames. This was a type of flame with life force. After Kong Shinmu sensed the life force in the flame of undead, he wanted to separate it from the flame. The life force in the flame of undead that was enveloped by the devouring power became more and more obvious. Kong Shinmu channeled his own power and separated a part of the life force. However, this life force was only a life force without any self-awareness. Moreover, after being separated from the flame of the dead spirits, this life force was declining. Kong Shinmu didn't know what this life force was, but he was sure that it had nothing to do with the flame of undead souls. From the looks of it, this life force could only rely on the undead spirit flame to survive. The flame of the undead spirits. Kong Shinmu was enlightened. The flames of undead spirits belong to the dead spirit race, so this vitality was most likely related to them. Before the vitality completely disappeared, Kong Shinmu stored it in the extreme 10-directional devil seal. After the life force entered the extreme 10-directional demon seal, it seemed to be absorbed by the seal. Kong Shinmu could not sense its aura. In any case, the life force in the flame of the dead spirit was life force, so it made sense that Lang Zhonghong wanted to control this life force and use a puppet technique. The devouring power could devour the flames of undead spirits, but it was very difficult to refine and absorb them. Moreover, this flame of the dead spirits was not simply the power of fire. It also contained an obscure power that was similar to life force. Just like the blood-colored mist that he absorbed in the demonic dragon cave contained 9 types of supreme divine powers, the flames of the dead spirits also contained more mixed powers other than the power of fire. Kong Shinmu could not distinguish the other powers in a short time, nor could he control them, but he could try the power of fire. Kong Shinmu gathered the power of supreme divine fire and tried to control the flame of the dead spirits again. Since the flame of the dead spirits could not be refined by the power of supreme divine fire, then he would control it first. As the power of supreme divine fire revolved, the flame of the dead spirits also revolved. The power of supreme divine fire reached the 6th level in an instant. The 6th level power of supreme divine fire could only barely control the flame of the dead spirits. The flame of the dead spirits that Kong Shinmu had devoured contained 2 mixed powers. The power of supreme divine fire controlled the flame of the dead spirits, as well as other powers. Powers that could not be controlled by the power of supreme divine fire did not belong to the power of fire. A portion of the power sank into the sea of consciousness of his soul and disappeared without a trace. It gave Kong Shinmu the feeling that the power that sank into the sea of consciousness of his soul and consciousness seemed to have been absorbed by the sea of consciousness of his soul and consciousness instead of sinking into it willingly. Every cultivator would pay special attention to the sea of consciousness of their soul and consciousness. Moreover, this was Kong Shinmu. This not only concerned whether he could leave this place now, but it also concerned his future cultivation. Under Kong Shinmu's observation, the mixed powers could still enter the sea of consciousness of his soul and consciousness. This could only mean that this power had been absorbed by the sea of consciousness of his soul and consciousness. Was it the power of the sea of consciousness of the soul itself, or the power of Supreme Soul? It was neither. Kong Shinmu quickly discovered that the power of the flame of the dead spirits was being absorbed by the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain. It was also at this time that Kong Shinmu realized that the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain had been sinking into the sea of consciousness of his soul and consciousness. Moreover, the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain was attached to the sea of consciousness of his soul and consciousness. When he released the sea of consciousness of his soul and consciousness, the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain would immediately spread out. With the protection of the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain, his soul and consciousness would not be disturbed. After the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain absorbed the mixed powers, Kong Shinmu could clearly feel that his soul and consciousness had become much stronger. There was also a trace of connection between him and the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain. Even if he did not control the power of Supreme Sacred Ice, he could still use a portion of the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain. Kong Shinmu grabbed hold of every opportunity that was beneficial to him and took the initiative to attack. After controlling the flame of the dead spirits, Kong Shinmu's figure moved and he approached Lang Zhonghong first. From the moment he entered the battle formation until now, Kong Shinmu had been holed up like a turtle. He did not even dare to face Lang Zhonghong head-on, let alone take the initiative to attack. His actions at this moment shocked Lang Zhonghong. But that was it. Look at him in a different light? Not at all. Kong Shinmu did not care what Lang Zhonghong was thinking at this moment. If he wanted to leave this place, he had to get rid of Lang Zhonghong. The flame of the dead spirits controlled by the power of the Supreme Sacred Fire at the 6th level was still not enough to deal with Lang Zhonghong. Especially when Lang Zhonghong released the flame of the dead spirits again. The flame of the dead spirits that Kong Shinmu had absorbed was almost controlled by Lang Zhonghong. At this moment, the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain that had been covering Lang Zhonghong's soul and consciousness started to show its power. The entire space seemed to be covered in a layer of frost. It was pure white and flawless, as if it was going to freeze all the darkness in this world. Those living beings from the other world, including God of Light, were already imprisoned in the pure white frost. Supreme Sacred Ice Domain. Lang Zhonghong's hoarse voice came from the armor. This low roar contained the power of the entire battlefield. The pure white world started to tremble, and the frost started to shatter. Even though the Supreme Sacred Ice Domain's imprisonment lasted for less than a breath's time, it was enough for Kong Shinmu. Chapter 56-81. The moment he grabbed the flame of the undead spirit, he felt a bone-chilling coldness that spread through his entire body. Kong Shinmu shivered involuntarily. The flame of the undead spirit escaped Kong Shinmu's control and Leng Zhonghong's range of control, blending into the space around him. Kong Shinmu was about to unseal his senses and hearing when he saw a black shadow dashing toward him. He instinctively dodged the black shadow's attack and controlled it with a backhand. It was Leng Zhonghong in his black armor. Leng Zhonghong's armor was a contractual artifact. He didn't know what he did, but the summoned contractual creatures all attacked Leng Zhonghong. When they got close to Leng Zhonghong's armor, they suddenly turned into a black mist, drilling into Leng Zhonghong's armor. Then, Leng Zhonghong's armor turned black. Kong Shinmu's eyes narrowed. His body moved, forcefully breaking through the black mist armor around him, approaching Leng Zhonghong. Without holding back, his attack fell on Leng Zhonghong's body. Kong Shinmu couldn't hear anything. He only saw the armor suddenly detach from the skeleton body, falling into the space. Without the armor to protect his body, Leng Zhonghong's skeleton body was exposed to Kong Shinmu's vision. Plus, Kong Shinmu had just pulled the flame of the undead spirit out of the skeleton, which was equivalent to cutting off Leng Zhonghong's life. Leng Zhonghong was unwilling, but he still fell. Kong Shinmu wanted to keep the armor, but he saw that the moment the armor landed, it disappeared into the space below. Not only the armor, but Leng Zhonghong's skeleton body also disappeared into the space below. This scene really surprised Kong Shinmu. He was also standing on the ground, so why did the armor and Leng Zhonghong's skeleton fall? Kong Shinmu was confused. He came to the place where the armor fell, but he didn't feel anything strange. He even wanted to take the armor back. As soon as he cast the spell, Kong Shinmu sensed a strange power coming from the space beneath his feet. The power contained within this power was very heterogeneous, including the power of the flame of the undead spirits. This mysterious power appeared suddenly and disappeared just as suddenly. Following that, the space began to collapse. Kong Shinmu seemed to have seen a whole new, unfamiliar world. What surprised Kong Shinmu even more was that even though he had sealed off his senses and hearing, he could still clearly sense the existence of the races from the other world. There were also noises coming from the other world. The noise sounded like someone was singing a strange ballad. Every time he sang, the creatures from the other world in this space seemed to resonate with him. One by one, they pulled themselves together and rushed toward him. Those chanted ballads were a kind of spell. To be precise, it was a summoning spell. Just like the 8-god star plate he possessed. The only difference was that the 8-god star plate mainly summoned the contracted creatures. It used the strength of the contracted creatures to weigh the strength of the 8-god star plate. This chanted spell used the spell itself to determine the strength of the contracted creatures. Kong Shinmu faced them head-on. With the mighty supreme sacred ice realm, he blocked all the creatures from the other world. Of course, even the supreme sacred ice realm could only block the power of the many creatures. It couldn't completely repel them. Just as Jiang Xinwu was about to activate the extreme 10-directional devil seal, he noticed that the creatures seemed to have seen something they were afraid of. They surrounded him and refused to move forward. It was the 8-god star plate. Kong Shinmu didn't hesitate to take out the 8-god star plate. The creatures stopped moving. Could it be that they were also afraid of the 8-god star plate? Kong Shinmu pondered for a while, then activated the 8-god star plate. Currently, he only knew how to use the 8-god star plate to release the contracted creatures. He didn't know how to form a contract with the creatures from the other world. Then, he used the spell to summon the contracted creatures in reverse. A miraculous scene happened. The creatures from the other world, who had been in a stalemate, suddenly knelt to Kong Shinmu, and then returned to the other world through the gate of contract. The moment the gate of contract opened, Kong Shinmu knew what to do. Only those who had signed the contract could pass through the gate of the contract. When they returned, there were more than a dozen contract marks on the 8-god star plate. Different from the special contract marks with Lu Zi and the other 4, there were more than a dozen contract marks, all of which indicated their origins. At a glance, it was clear that there were more than a dozen different races. Of course, the most eye-catching among them was the ancient spirits. Lu Zi was an ancient spirit, and she had signed a contract with the ancient spirits. Kong Shinmu guessed that this might be the contract of the entire ancient spirit. Earlier, when Kong Xinmu had seen Lang Zhonghong's armor sign a contract with more than a dozen races from the other world, he had more or less yearned for it. That was why he had thought of collecting the armor when he had knocked it off. After all, no one would complain about having more magic tools to contract with. Unfortunately, the magic tool of the armor had fallen into the space and lost contact with it. But now, Kong Xinmu had successfully used the 8-God Star Plate to sign contracts with those races from the other world, which made him look at the 8-God Star Plate in a new light. Kong Xinmu didn't expect that the 8-God Star Plate could sign contracts with so many races from the other world. He estimated that the quality of the 8-God Star Plate was comparable to that of Lang Zhonghong's armor. At the same time, he was curious about the origin of the 8-God Star Plate. When Hai Fan had obtained the 8-God Star Plate by chance, it had already lost its base. If he had found the place where Hai Fan had obtained the 8-God Star Plate, there might be some clues about its base. It seemed that he had to meet the people of the Everlasting Pavilion. Divine Light, who was standing next to him, saw what had just happened and was shocked. It seemed that his perception had been sealed, but in fact, it had become sharper and had reached a state of psychic communication. This was the power of the Supreme Holy Ice Realm. From the looks of it, the new owner of the 8-God Star Plate had some skills. No wonder he was recognized by the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Kong Xinmu unsealed his perception and hearing. Before he could say anything to Divine Light, he heard Lang Zhonghong's voice. "Kid, don't be happy too early. The 7 devouring demon sealing art isn't something you can touch." It was just like Lang Zhonghong's voice, ancient and distant. Kong Xinmu carefully sensed for a while, but he couldn't sense anything. The space had completely collapsed and returned to its original state. At this time, Kong Xinmu stood in the deserted courtyard and looked at the disappearing space. He was a little hesitant. "Divine Light, can I use the flame of undead spirits now?" Kong Xinmu quickly focused his mind and sensed the traces of the flame of undead spirits. "Yes." Divine Light was slightly startled, but he quickly responded. With a wave of his hand, a dark green flame swept out from the side. Kong Xinmu stored it in the 10-directional devil seal. The crisis was over, and Divine Light returned to his original world. Chapter 5682. This battle that was triggered by the 7 devouring demon sealing art ended just like that. Kong Xinmu did not know what the 7 devouring demon sealing art was, which was why Lang Zhonghong wanted to destroy it at all costs. In order to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art, Lang Zhonghong's obsession incarnated in this ancient city, in the name of protecting the 7 devouring demon sealing art, waiting for cultivators who came looking for the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Presumably, many of the puppet residents in the ancient desolate city were cultivators who came looking for the 7 devouring demon sealing art. It was also because of this matter that Kong Xinmu saw the true face of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, Fengling. He did not know whether this was a blessing or a curse. The moment Lang Zhonghong disappeared, his words caused Kong Xinmu to waver. In this battle between destroying the 7 devouring demon sealing art and protecting the 7 devouring demon sealing art, it seemed like Kong Xinmu was the winner. But in reality, there was an unknown conspiracy hidden within. Moreover, because of Lang Zhonghong's words, Kong Xinmu even had a feeling that Lang Zhonghong's obsession still existed. As long as the 7 devouring demon sealing art was not destroyed, Lang Zhonghong's obsession would continue to exist. Kong Xinmu was already a qualified supreme cultivator. He was no longer young and frivolous. Along the way, other than the growth of his cultivation, his temperament had also been tempered. If Fengling did not appear, Kong Xinmu would only think that the 7 devouring demon sealing art was some kind of evil technique. As long as one could control it well, it would be able to play its role. But then, Fengling appeared. In order not to be destroyed by Lang Zhonghong, Fengling chose to stand on Kong Xinmu's side. But this did not mean that Fengling recognized Kong Xinmu as the new owner of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Between the two, there was only a relationship of benefits. What made Kong Xinmu afraid was that Fengling could summon the Divine Light. It was said that Shunguang had signed a contract with the 8-God astrolabe before Hai Fan picked it up. When Kong Xinmu killed Hai Fan, Shunguang did not show up. However, at this time, he appeared because of Fengling's summon. It wasn't that Kong Xinmu hadn't summoned the Divine Light before, but he had failed. How did Fengling achieve this with the spirit of the 7 devouring devil sealing art? Furthermore, He had never come into contact with the 8-god star plate before. Rather than saying that Fengling was the spirit of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, it would be better to say that Fengling was an independent entity. Just like Xueqi and the others, he existed in a parallel world. Due to some coincidences, he came to this world and was trapped in the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Of course, these were just Kong Shinmu's guesses. As for what Fengling's true identity was, Fengling had no intention of revealing it. After this battle ended, she had no intention of revealing it. After this battle ended, Fengling disappeared. Kong Shinmu could still use the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. He could also activate the inscriptions of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. The power within had also recovered to its original strength. However, the devouring ability of the devouring power had increased by quite a bit. After devouring the flame of undead spirits, he had also absorbed a portion of the flame of undead spirits and obtained a portion of the flame of undead spirits attributes. Now, when devouring something, he would refine a portion of the devoured power. No matter who Fengling was, what Kong Shinmu needed to do now was to become stronger. If he was strong enough, he wouldn't be afraid of being devoured. The 8-god astrolabe was now a part of his strength. This time, he had to find the base of the 8-god astrolabe. Whether it was Xueqi, Cruel or Piyuan, they were all potential threats. Kong Shinmu looked at the 8-god astrolabe again. The dozen or so contract imprints were basically the same, giving him the feeling that he had absolute control. As for the other 5 different imprints, they represented 5 contracted living beings. They weren't absolute control. Kong Shinmu pondered for a moment. He gathered his soul consciousness and imprinted it on these 5 imprints. A layer of faint white halo flashed. This was the power of the Supreme Sacred Ice Realm. As he expected, the Supreme Sacred Ice Realm's power basically covered his soul consciousness. The Supreme Sacred Ice Realm's power covered the imprints, causing the gray imprints to gradually be dyed white. It was more like a suppressive barrier. After doing all this, Kong Shinmu set off. However, he had only taken a few steps when he felt some strange movements from the flame of undead spirits. The flame of undead spirits seemed to have sensed something and released a ghostly glow. This ghostly glow gave Kong Shinmu a feeling that it was hot and cold at the same time. It was very strange. Kong Shinmu stopped and looked around. Only then did he realize that this courtyard was no longer the courtyard with the battle formation. Although the buildings around this courtyard were a little old, they were still in good condition and hadn't suffered any serious damage. Looking at the style of the buildings, it was no longer in the ancient desolate city. Not long ago, when they were trapped in the battle formation, Tang Xiaoyu had sent Senior Moya out of the battle formation. She should still be in the ancient desolate city. Kong Shinmu immediately collected his thoughts and prepared to head to the ancient desolate city. Before he took a few steps, he felt the strange feeling from the flame of undead spirits again. Kong Shinmu released the Supreme Sacred Ice Realm's power and sensed the things around him. Wait, there seems to be something? With a glance, Kong Shinmu saw a black metal piece that had fallen to the side. This black metal piece looked very familiar. Moreover, the power it gave off was very similar to the power when the Annihilation Realm opened. After the Annihilation Realm exploded, it had indeed become a piece. But it couldn't be such a coincidence, right? Even if it had become a piece, it should be in the ancient desolate city and not in this unfamiliar city. Kong Shinmu stared at the black metal piece with a solemn expression and looked at the place where the metal piece had fallen. On the roof of the 4-story pavilion, there were a few cultivators fighting together. All of them were unforgiving. I have already told you the clues of the star map lock. Do you still want to fight with me for this mystic iron fragment? The person who spoke was wearing the same clothes as Hai Fan. He was a disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion. If someone else said that this is a mystic iron fragment, I might believe it. But you are a disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion. Why would a disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion fight with us for a mere mystic iron fragment? The person who spoke was a yellow-haired young man. The young man looked at the disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion coldly and sneered. Don't hide anything. We all know that this is an Annihilation Realm fragment. I can't back down. What a coincidence. I can't back down either. The disciple of the Everlasting Pavilion added. Both sides, no, it should be multiple sides, were in a stalemate. Looking at their stance, they didn't seem to have noticed Kong Shinmu's existence. Kong Shinmu silently went over to pick up the Annihilation Realm fragment. He put it away and quickly left the place. His journey was smooth until he reached the city gate. Seeing that the city gate was right in front of him, Kong Shinmu was stopped by Gu Tianze, who suddenly appeared. "You are Kong Shinmu? Why are you still alive?" Chapter 56-83. At that time, when Kong Shinmu was trapped in the battle formation of the battlefield domain, everything he faced, Gu Tianze had already predicted. Kong Shinmu seemed to have the strength to fight Lang Zhonghong, but that was only because Lang Zhonghong did not use his full strength. Once Lang Zhonghong had the intention to kill, Kong Shinmu would not be able to escape no matter what. Not only Gu Tianze thought so, even Qing Fu, that mysterious young man, and even Lian Yi, they all thought that Kong Shinmu would lose his life in the battle formation of General Lang Zhonghong. Therefore at this time, when Gu Tianze saw Kong Shinmu appear here, he was abnormally surprised. Moreover, this city was also a certain distance away from the ancient desolate city. How did Kong Shinmu arrive at this ancient city, and did not reveal any traces? Kong Shinmu had seen Gu Tianze before, but did not know who this person was. He only lightly nodded at Gu Tianze, then bypassed Gu Tianze, and walked towards the city gate. Gu Tianze was surprised that Kong Shinmu could actually walk out of Lang Zhonghong's battlefield domain. Seeing that Kong Shinmu was about to leave the city, his figure suddenly turned, rushing towards Kong Shinmu, slapping out a palm. Kong Shinmu had long been vigilant. When Gu Tianze made his move, he promptly used the Supreme Dragon Martial skill, dodging Gu Tianze's attack while also blocking Gu Tianze's palm. Judging from the level of Kong Shinmu's Supreme Dragon Martial skill, Kong Shinmu's strength seemed to have improved a lot. Gu Tianze could not help but secretly sigh in his heart at Kong Shinmu's talent. Kong Shinmu's mind was focused, operating his own strength, ready to fight at any time. In this world, there was always competition between cultivators. Being in the secret realm, it was even more so. Every cultivator was an opponent competing with each other. In order to compete for the cultivation resources in the secret realm, there were many who fell out and became enemies. This was the case for the disciples of the same sect, not to mention strangers. Apart from respect, Kong Shinmu was more on guard against Gu Tianze. Gu Tianze could see that Kong Shinmu was on guard against him and did not find it strange at all. When he sensed the power around Kong Shinmu again, he couldn't help but feel surprised. Kong Shinmu had really obtained the power of the fragment of the 7 devouring devil sealing art. The corners of his lips curled up, revealing a meaningful smile. There were all kinds of rumors about the 7 devouring demon sealing art, but as for how many of them were true, not many people knew. Even General Lang Zhonghong, who wholeheartedly wanted to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art, did not have a complete understanding of it. In this world, Feng was probably the only one who had a complete understanding of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Unfortunately, just like the legend of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, the world's theory of sealing was also very mysterious and not very trustworthy. Now that Kong Shinmu obtained 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, whether it was a blessing or a curse, it would have to depend on Kong Shinmu's fortune. Gu Tianze, as one of the enforcement elders in charge of the 4 great sects in the Outer Realm, could be said to be the existence with the highest authority in the Outer Realm on the surface. Regarding the rumor that fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art would appear in the mystic realm, he had naturally long heard of it. However, compared to the 7 devouring demon sealing art fragments, he was more concerned about Feng's traces. The existence of the 7 devouring demon sealing art seemed to have suddenly appeared in the world of cultivators. Its origins were a mystery. The cultivation methods, secret treasures, or magic artifacts, or even sacred items of heaven and earth, did not appear out of thin air for no reason. Whether it was refined by cultivators, or derived from the formation of the cultivation world, and so on, all would have a certain origin. And regarding the origins of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, there was simply no credible basis. It was said that the spirit of the 7 devouring demon sealing art was called Fengling. By controlling Fengling, one could know the origins of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, as well as the mysterious world behind it. Gu Tianze did not have much understanding of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, but he knew a thing or two about Fengling. Generally, the spirits of magic artifacts or cultivation methods were formed because the magic artifacts, cultivation methods, and cultivation methods had absorbed the essence of heaven and earth for a long time, and after a long period of tempering. In essence, they were still magic artifacts, cultivation methods, and cultivation methods. If the magic artifacts, cultivation methods, and cultivation methods were damaged, their spirits would also be injured, and in serious cases, they might disappear. If the spirit wanted to be formed again, it would require a long recovery process. But Feng Ling was different. Feng Ling could travel through the other world. Without opening the gate of contract or the gate of the other world, he could travel through the other world with his own strength. This was what Gu Tianzi saw with his own eyes in the process of searching for Feng. It was something that Feng had personally recorded. Regardless of whether this matter was true or false, it made Gu Tianzi lose interest in studying the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Being in a high position, one's knowledge was broader. There were some things that they could not easily touch, and this phenomenon was called heavenly rule. Like the 7 devouring demon sealing art that surpassed heavenly rule, Gu Tianzi would not touch it if he could. Gu Tianzi came to this city to search for Feng's whereabouts, so he did not stay for long, and quickly left this place. Even after Gu Tianzi left, Kong Xinmu did not relax. After walking out of this ancient city with his tense nerves, Kong Xinmu finally heaved a sigh of relief. Even though he had experienced that great battle and had a breakthrough in his cultivation, when he faced Gu Tianzi, he could still feel a strong sense of oppression. Gu Tianzi did not interfere with Kong Xinmu, but he did not intend to let Kong Xinmu off just like that. Just now, he had felt the aura of fallen destruction. In the ancient desolate city, after fallen destruction's explosion, although there was no huge explosion, fallen destruction was indeed destroyed. Kong Xinmu and the rest wholeheartedly left the fallen destruction ruins for the 7 devouring demon sealing art fragment, and the fallen destruction fragment fell into the hands of other cultivators. That cultivator brought the fallen destruction fragment out of the ancient desolate city, and when he came to this city, he met the everlasting pavilion disciples. In the process of fighting for the fallen destruction fragment, the first disciple who obtained the fragment was killed. The fallen destruction fragment fell into the city. Gu Tianzi would not let Kong Xinmu have it so easily. Before he left, he sent a message to those everlasting pavilion disciples who were arguing. The group of people then realized that the fallen destruction fragment had already disappeared. One by one, they flew out of the ancient city, and caught up to Kong Xinmu, and surrounded Kong Xinmu. Hand over the fallen destruction. The first to speak was the everlasting pavilion disciple. The moment he opened his mouth, it revealed that the profound iron fragment that had just fallen was actually a fragment of perish. More accurately, it was fallen destruction. The main form of the fallen destruction artifact was such a small fragment. What palace? It was just a self-formed space. Fallen destruction itself was also a spatial artifact. Of course, after experiencing that explosion, the self-formed space had already been destroyed, and the supreme sacred ice domain power within it had been completely devoured by Kong Xinmu. It could be said that the current fallen destruction did not have much value. Kong Xinmu stopped in his tracks. These people looked like they were stupid, and they actually caught up so quickly. Chapter 56-84. No one will blatantly tell others that he took the destruction fragment. It was a disciple of the Wuji Pavilion who spoke. He seemed to have a certain prestige among the disciples of the Wuji Pavilion. As soon as he opened his mouth, someone else chimed in. Anyone with a brain wouldn't admit that they took annihilation. As the words left his mouth, the few of them looked at Zhang Shunwu with ridicule in their eyes. Be it the disciples of the Wuji Pavilion or the other sects, their words and actions were all filled with greed. They all wanted the destruction fragment. Kong Xinmu was curious. Although the destruction fragment was comparable to a sacred grade, there was still a gap between it and a sacred grade. Not to mention, the destruction fragment had been destroyed in the explosion. Right now, annihilation was really just a fragment of it. Kong Xinmu suddenly recalled Feng Ling's reminder. Could it be that the annihilation fragment had other uses? I found him first. You'd better not get in the way. The person who spoke was wearing gray and white clothes with a pattern of auspicious clouds on his chest. He was wearing the same clothes as the few people who were rushing over from the city. They should be from the same sect. Are all the people of the Cloud sect so rude? The disciples of the Wuji Pavilion all had ugly expressions. Both sides were aggressive and at daggers drawn. No one was willing to give in to the other. Kong Xinmu glanced at the two sides and strode forward. There were other cultivators apart from the Cloud sect and the Wuji Pavilion. They ignored the argument between the Wuji Pavilion and the Wuji Pavilion and went forward to block Kong Shinmu's path. They seemed to be itinerant cultivators. Stop! The itinerant cultivators stared at Kong Shinmu with unfriendly expressions. Hand over the destruction fragment if you want to leave. Seeing that Kong Shinmu had no intention of stopping, the itinerant cultivators' faces darkened. They threw a few talismans at Kong Shinmu without any hesitation. The talismans surrounded Kong Shinmu and exploded. When Kong Shinmu saw the talisman, he immediately thought of the supreme incantation. He immediately unleashed the supreme power of the soul and dispelled the supreme curse. It was also at this time that Kong Shinmu felt the power of these rogue cultivators' supreme curse. Just by looking at their auras and sensing their powers, Kong Shinmu would never have guessed that these few rogue cultivators also had the cultivation of level 6 supreme god power. However, Kong Shinmu's peerless soul power was the bane of peerless curses. When the supreme soul force suppressed the supreme curse technique, the devouring power swept out and devoured the supreme curse technique that was attacking him. In the eyes of these rogue cultivators, Kong Shinmu had easily dispelled their attacks. Let's attack together. Compared to the disciples of the Wuji Pavilion and the Cloud sect, these rogue cultivators were more rational. Seeing that Kong Shinmu was a difficult person to deal with, they immediately banded together to fight against Kong Shinmu. These few people all had at least level 6 supreme god power. When they attacked together, even Kong Shinmu did not dare to be careless. Kong Shinmu gathered the devouring power and swept it towards the few cultivators who were blocking his way. Soon, they were surrounded. Although they all had level 6 supreme god power, Kong Shinmu's supreme god power had broken through to level 6 in the previous battle and was able to resist the peak of level 7. These few people's attacking methods were mainly the supreme curse technique. If they could devour the supreme curse technique, they might be able to make a breakthrough in their supreme divine firepower. Kong Shinmu's first attack shocked the few rogue cultivators. Rogue cultivators dare to be so arrogant? Jiang Shenwu appeared here alone. Anyone could tell that he was a rogue cultivator. It was really arrogant for a rogue cultivator to dare to challenge so many cultivators. Aren't you guys also rogue cultivators? Kong Shinmu was not afraid of these rogue cultivators' attacks. He just felt that their words were strange. We're all rogue cultivators, but you guys are even more arrogant than me? Kong Shinmu raised his eyebrows. He did not hold back at all and charged out of the encirclement forcefully. He then defeated all the rogue cultivators. Moreover, he was not a rogue cultivator. It was just that he had accidentally barged into this secret realm. After dealing with the trouble, Kong Shinmu left quickly. He was so fast that the disciples of the Cloud sect from the Wuji Pavilion had not caught up yet. However, this did not mean that no one was blocking his way. Just as Kong Shinmu left the ancient city, he saw large groups of cultivators rushing over. Not long ago, the news of Kong Shinmu breaking the battle formation in the ancient desolation ancient city spread like wildfire. Once the news spread, it could not be stopped. Before Kong Shinmu returned to the ancient desolation ancient city, the news had already spread. Kong Shinmu breaking the battle formation meant that Kong Shinmu had obtained the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art in the ancient desolation ancient city. All the cultivators who came to the ancient desolation ancient city came for the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. They did not care about what happened after the battle formation in the ancient desolation ancient city was opened. They did not care how many cultivators died for the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. They did not care how Kong Shinmu obtained the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. The cultivators who came for the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art only had one goal, and that was to obtain the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. The battle formation in the ancient desolation ancient city was broken, and the courtyard where the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art was sealed also turned into ashes. The ancient desolation ancient city had experienced a great battle and was in ruins. The cultivators who were waiting outside the city to reap the benefits did not wait for Kong Shinmu, nor did they find any trace of Kong Shinmu in the ancient desolation ancient city. Judging from the degree of distortion in the surrounding space when the battle formation was broken, Kong Shinmu had already left the ancient desolation ancient city. When the news that Kong Shinmu had obtained the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art spread out, the cultivators also started searching for traces of Kong Shinmu from the ancient desolation ancient city. Mo Ya and Tang Xiaoyu were the first to know that Kong Shinmu was not in the ancient desolation ancient city. Different from other people's understanding, the two speculated that Kong Shinmu had been sent out of the ancient desolation ancient city by the distorted space of the battlefield domain. Moya used the degree of distortion in the space to speculate the approximate location of Kong Shinmu. However, Tang Xiaoyu could not use the 10,000 elephants origin superimposition technique. Senior, the space here is a little strange. Tang Xiaoyu could feel a strange force interfering with him, regardless of whether it was the superimposition technique or the overlapping space. Moya carefully sensed this space. Soon, she found traces of the creatures from the other world appearing at the intersection of the distorted space. Moya's beautiful eyes narrowed when she noticed this. She quickly thought of the previous explosion and the appearance of the other side of spacetime. Such a powerful explosion did not produce too much power, so the only explanation was that it was the other side of spacetime. The other side of spacetime was connected to other parallel worlds, and the other world was one of them. Compared to other worlds, the other world was more special. The cultivators of this world could sign contracts with the creatures of the other world through the contract artifact, thereby summoning the contract of the other world to this world. Chapter 5685. Could it be that Kong Shinmu had been drawn into the other world? Moya's beautiful eyes stared at the distorted space, trying to sense the nearby aura. After sensing for a long time, she couldn't sense Kong Shinmu's aura. In other words, there wasn't any aura of Kong Shinmu in the vicinity. The battlefield domain hadn't been broken for a long time. It was reasonable to say that even if Kong Shinmu wanted to leave, there should be some remnants of his aura. However, there wasn't the slightest trace of Kong Shinmu's aura. Not only that, but there wasn't even the slightest trace of a living creature's aura. Senior, do you think that Brother Jiang has left? After Tang Xiaoyu's 10th attempt to use the 10,000 elephants origin superposition technique failed, he made a bold guess after searching around. Ever since he was sent out of the battle formation by Kong Shinmu, Tang Xiaoyu had been accompanying Moya in the ancient desolation city and hadn't gone anywhere. They knew that Kong Shinmu was trapped in the battle formation, but they couldn't do anything. They only knew that not long ago, the battlefield domain that had enveloped the ancient desolation city had inexplicably disappeared. Even the courtyard that was covered by the battle formation had returned to its original appearance. However, there seemed to be a special layer of space in the courtyard that they couldn't break through. At this time, they could finally break through that special layer of space and enter the courtyard, but they couldn't see Kong Shinmu's figure. Maybe. Moya hoped that it was as Tang Xiaoyu said. She didn't dare to think about what would happen to Kong Shinmu if he was drawn into the other world. The other world was an extremely dangerous world for anyone in this world. The space here is very special. I feel like it's a phenomenon from the other side of time and space. Brother Jiang might have been transported to another place through the battle formation. In fact, Tang Xiaoyu's first reaction was that he had been transported to another space. Seeing that Senior Moya's face didn't look good, he changed his words. Although he didn't say it clearly, both of them were well aware of it. Senior, why don't we go to another ancient city to take a look? Tang Xiaoyu patted his forehead and hurriedly added. Senior, this junior will go nearby to take a look first. After speaking, Tang Xiaoyu turned around and left. Tang Xiaoyu often dealt with people from the Limitless Pavilion, so he had some understanding of High Fan Star Devourer. High Fan Star Devourer could summon contracted beings from the other world, and Tang Xiaoyu had fought with them before. They were very strong. Once Kong Shinmu was sucked into the netherworld, he would be doomed. The reason why Tang Xiaoyu chose to help Kong Shinmu was that he wanted to see his idol. To him, Emperor Shi was very sacred. She was his idol. In the past, if he had wanted to meet Emperor Shi, he would have been eliminated by the cruel world of cultivation before he could even find Emperor Shi. Now, with great difficulty, he finally had a certain level of ability. Not only had he mastered the art of multiplication, which was an excellent escape technique, but he had also met Kong Shinmu, who might know some clues about Emperor Shi. This was the best opportunity for him to meet his idol. Tang Xiaoyu didn't want to miss this opportunity. It could be said that Tang Xiaoyu only helped Kong Shinmu because he wanted to see his idol, Emperor Shi. Tang Xiaoyu knew that Kong Shinmu's chances of survival were not high, so he could have just left. However, Tang Xiaoyu didn't. He chose to stay and look for Kong Shinmu. He did this because in the battle matrix, Kong Shinmu trusted him. The world of cultivation was cruel. Only the strong could survive, and only the strong could have the right to decide the life and death of the weak. Every cultivator was a competitor, and it was very difficult to find a confidant who could trust each other. In that kind of environment, Kong Xinmu trusted him enough. This made Tang Xiaoyu want to make friends with Kong Xinmu from the bottom of his heart. On the boring and lonely path of cultivation, it was worth it to have someone you could trust, even if you were doomed eternally. Emoya retracted her gaze and walked around the courtyard. The courtyard looked as if nothing had happened. There were no traces. When she glanced at the distorted space again, she saw that it had finally returned to its normal state. Emoya bit her lips and her brows were tightly knitted. In the end, she still firmly believed that Kong Xinmu could not be sucked into the other world. Gritting her teeth, she turned around and left the courtyard. As soon as she left, she sensed a large number of strange auras approaching the desolate ancient city's gate. Their speed was so fast that in just a breath's time, they instantly entered the desolate ancient city from a few miles away. Tang Xiaoyu stepped back. Emoya hurriedly shouted. As soon as her voice fell, the crowd surrounded Tang Xiaoyu and Emoya. Not here. One of them looked at Tang Xiaoyu and Emoya, then looked behind them. Seeing that Kong Xinmu was not there, he asked doubtfully. At the same time, Kong Xinmu had just stepped out of the strange ancient city and encountered a group of cultivators. Looking at the direction they were heading in, it seemed that they were not in the same direction. After getting closer, Kong Xinmu heard that these people were heading for the 7 devouring demon sealing art. They entered the secret territory from other entrances and followed the clues of the 7 devouring demon sealing art all the way to the desolate ancient city. It just so happened that they heard the rumor that Kong Xinmu had broken the formation and obtained the treasure, so they were looking for Kong Xinmu's whereabouts everywhere. Kong Xinmu roughly glanced at these people. They were not the group of cultivators who entered the desolate ancient city. Seeing this scene, Kong Xinmu sighed. Apart from them, there were 2 types of people who entered the secret territory. The first type followed the fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. There were 2 kinds of people in this group. The first kind had a fanatical pursuit of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. They went to the desolate ancient city immediately, and ended up being refined into a puppet by the battle formation. The second kind was to wait and see, which was also this group of people. They were clear that there were countless cultivators who came to compete for the 7 devouring demon sealing art. It was bound to lead to bloodshed. Compared to the first kind of people, this kind of people were more suitable to become experts. They were greedy enough, but they could seize the opportunity when they were greedy and not be the first bird to be cannon fodder. The other kind of people scoffed at the 7 devouring demon sealing art. They disdained to participate in the competition for the fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Just like Qing Fu and Gu Tianzi, whom they met not long ago. The closer they got to the desolate ancient city, the more cultivators they could see. Although everyone heard that a young man named Kong Xinmu broke the battle formation and obtained the fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art in the desolate ancient city. In fact, not many people had seen Kong Xinmu. Even if Kong Xinmu moved like this, not many people cared. They just thought that he was a cultivator like them who came to compete for the fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Half an hour later, Kong Xinmu saw the desolate ancient city. At the same time, he sensed the chaotic aura in the city. It seemed that there were cultivators fighting. The aura was very strange, but one of them was very familiar. It was Emoya. Chapter 56-86. Ancient Desolation Ancient City. A large number of cultivators gathered and formed an encirclement around Emoya and Tang Xiaoyu. Some people recognized Tang Xiaoyu and knew that he was a disciple of Tianyuan Palace, which was why they did not make a move. Even so, the crowd did not intend to give in. Speak, where is Kong Xinmu? Tang Xiaoyu was very calm in the face of so many cultivators questioning him. What a coincidence. We are also looking for Kong Xinmu. Tang Xiaoyu shrugged his shoulders helplessly. Speaking of which, we came here a few days ago and have been looking for him for a long time, but we could not find him. Tang Xiaoyu's words and actions were very natural, and no one could tell that he was faking it. However, this was not enough to gain the trust of the crowd. After all, those who knew Tang Xiaoyu would know him better. Tang Xiaoyu said that he was a disciple of Tianyuan Palace, but because he violated the rules of Tianyuan Palace, he had escaped. Tianyuan Palace even sent Lian Yi to capture him. This person was best at two things. First, he was especially good at escaping. Second, he was glib. Most of the words that came out of his mouth were not trustworthy. Therefore, when they heard Tang Xiaoyu's words, the crowd only smiled in disdain and did not take it seriously. Most of the cultivators' attention was mainly focused on Mo Ya. Many people were unfamiliar with Kong Xinmu's appearance. However, they all knew that there was a woman beside Kong Xinmu. Mo Ya was in the ancient desolation ancient city, which was equivalent to Kong Xinmu being in the ancient desolation ancient city. In particular, Mo Ya's aura was dark and unpredictable, making it difficult for people to grasp her. She was a strong opponent. Tang Xiaoyu, you better tell us the truth. Otherwise, even if your eldest senior brother is here, we will not show mercy. The person who spoke was wearing the uniform of Wuji Pavilion. Tang Xiaoyu recognized this person. His name was Wu Yun, and he had the same master as Hai Fan. Tang Xiaoyu could not remember if it was the seventh elder or the first elder. Wu Yun, didn't you tell me about the clues of Kong Xinmu? You are hiding it from me, and now you want to gang up on me? Tang Xiaoyu glanced at Wu Yun indignantly. These words caused Wu Yun's face to darken. Tang Xiaoyu, everyone who knows you knows your character. Don't bother with these useless things. Hand over Kong Xinmu obediently, and we'll still be allies. Wu Yun's words directly determined the relationship between the Limitless Pavilion and the Heaven Yuan Palace. Wu Yun, are you crazy? You can represent the Limitless Pavilion, but that doesn't mean Tang Xiaoyu can represent the Heavenly Origin Palace. Someone in the crowd laughed. As they spoke, the encirclement began to shrink. Moreover, there were people who wanted to seize this opportunity to capture Mo Ya. Although Tang Xiaoyu was talking, he was actually secretly casting a spell. He had to send Senior Mo Ya out of the ancient desolate city. There were many cultivators who were eyeing Mo Ya covetously. None of them were weak, having the ability of a supreme level 5. However, their opponent was Mo Ya. It would not be an exaggeration to say that none of the people present were a match for Mo Ya. What Mo Ya was really afraid of was the obscure aura at the city gate. Mo Ya did not know who that person was. Ever since this group of people came in, that aura had been there and had not left until now. Mo Ya sensed the aura that suddenly attacked her from behind. She easily dodged the sneak attacker's attack. Wu Yun, don't you have any shame? It's fine if you surround a weak girl with such a big commotion, but you still want to sneak attack? Tang Xiaoyu could not take it anymore. After he shouted, the cultivators who were confronting him no longer cared about the fact that Tang Xiaoyu was from the Heavenly Yuan Palace. They wanted to use brute force to control the two of them. Senior, this junior will cover you. Tang Xiaoyu stepped forward and blocked the cultivator who was attacking him. Soon, Tang Xiaoyu was wrestling with the crowd. This was Mo Ya's first time seeing Tang Xiaoyu fight. The cultivation that Tang Xiaoyu displayed surprised Mo Ya. Tang Xiaoyu's supreme divine power cultivation had also reached level 7. This was indeed beyond Mo Ya's expectations. The ancient desolation ancient city was suddenly in chaos. Kong Xinmu, who had just entered the city, sensed Mo Ya and Tang Xiaoyu's aura. Just as he was about to head over, he sensed an obscure aura. This aura seemed familiar, but it was also a little strange. Kong Xinmu looked around vigilantly and quickly found the owner of this aura. It was a young man wearing the Limitless Pavilion's disciple uniform. He was sitting at the top of the ancient desolation ancient city's gate like a spectator, sizing up the battle that was happening in the city. When Kong Xinmu looked at the young man also looked over. This person was the disciple of the Limitless Pavilion's great elder, Dan Yuanfei. Like many cultivators, Dan Yuanfei had never seen Kong Xinmu in person. Hence, when he saw Kong Xinmu, he was very indifferent. Kong Xinmu quickly retracted his gaze and dashed in Mo Ya's direction. The moment Kong Xinmu's figure dashed out, Dan Yuanfei sensed the aura around Kong Xinmu's body. Dan Yuanfei's expression changed slightly. His pair of eyes locked tightly on Kong Xinmu's figure. The aura that leaked out from Kong Xinmu's body was very strong. Of course, what really attracted Dan Yuanfei's attention was the other cold aura on Kong Xinmu's body. This kind of dark and cold power made Dan Yuanfei think of Hai Fan. The aura leaked out from Hai Fan's summoning contract artifact, Star Eater, was very similar to the aura leaked out from Kong Xinmu. Hai Fan had followed Gu Feng to the ancient desolation ancient city not long ago. Gu Feng had already headed to the destination a few days ago. Only Hai Fan had not caught up. There was another piece of bad news. The specific Heart Soul Stone that could track Hai Fan's tracks had shattered. The Heart Soul Stone contained Hai Fan's soul consciousness. In short, any changes that happened to the Heart Soul Stone represented Hai Fan's encounter. Now that the Heart Soul Stone had shattered, it indicated that Hai Fan was in danger. Dan Yuanfei released his soul consciousness and locked on to Kong Shinmu's movements. Kong Shinmu had already arrived in front of Emoya and stopped the cultivators who wanted to attack Emoya. "Senior, sorry to keep you waiting." Kong Shinmu forcefully repelled the cultivators who were charging at him and walked towards Emoya. Emoya's beautiful eyes curved and contained a faint smile. She did not care about the people present. Her slender jade-like hand pressed on Kong Shinmu's shoulder and used her divine power to check on Kong Shinmu's physical condition. Kong Shinmu keenly sensed that the supreme sacred ice domain hidden in his soul consciousness had condensed and formed a boundary around his soul consciousness. Emoya only wanted to check on Kong Shinmu's physical condition. Seeing that Kong Shinmu was not injured, she quickly withdrew her power. "The timing is just right." Emoya smiled gently. He could not help but sigh. After not seeing Kong Shinmu for some time, his cultivation seemed to have improved a lot. "Then let's go." Tang Xiaoyu saw that Kong Shinmu had arrived and did not continue fighting. Chapter 56-87. Kong Shinmu. Dan Yuanfei recognized Kong Shinmu. At the same time, many cultivators gathered in the city also focused on Kong Shinmu. This person was their target, Kong Shinmu. "That's Kong Shinmu, everyone attack!" Someone shouted, and the people who were in a deadlock suddenly moved. Facing the attacks of the crowd, Kong Shinmu casually used his supreme dragon martial skill, and easily repelled all the cultivators who were blocking his way. He even comprehended a new supreme dragon martial skill in the process of fighting. Ever since he stepped into the supreme level, the supreme dragon martial skill that Kong Shinmu could use was very simple, and it was derived from his original dragon martial skill. In the process of fighting, Kong Shinmu comprehended a new supreme dragon martial skill. Before stepping into the supreme level, the dragon martial skill was not useless, it was just that the method of derivation was wrong. Since it could derive a type of supreme dragon martial skill, it could derive even more supreme dragon martial skills. Kong Shinmu used supreme divine power to derive the original dragon martial skill into supreme dragon martial skill. The deterrence of the supreme dragon martial technique was much stronger than the original dragon martial technique. More importantly, supreme dragon martial skill could contend with supreme divine power, which was something that the original dragon martial skill could not compare to. No matter how strong a dragon martial skill was, it could not contend with supreme divine power, and against a supreme level cultivator, it was useless. Tang Xiaoyu's methods were not inferior to Kong Shinmu's. The two of them repelled the surrounding cultivators and rushed out of the ancient desolate ancient city. Kong Shinmu always paid attention to Emoya. He would not allow Emoya to suffer any harm. At the entrance of the ancient desolate ancient city, unknowingly, a large number of cultivators had gathered, each of them staring at the ancient desolate ancient city. Some of the cultivators came for the fragment of the 7 devouring devil sealing art. After the trouble in the ancient desolate ancient city, General Leng Chonghong was defeated, they rushed over. There were also cultivators who were purely passers-by. Their real goal was the Star Atlas Lock. The Star Map Lock was a very special magic tool. Not only could it contain living creatures, but it could also be used by cultivators for cultivation. This was because the Star Atlas Lock itself was a spatial magic tool. In a sense, the Star Map Lock was equivalent to a contract summoning artifact. It had a certain connection with the complete 8-god star chart. The main goal of the Outer Realm sects, including the Heaven Origin Palace and the Everlasting Pavilion, was the Star Map Lock. The ancestor who opened up the Outer Realm once left behind a mysterious text, which was later deciphered by the Great Elder of the Everlasting Pavilion. The general idea was that one day, a moving mystic realm would appear in the Outer Realm. At that time, the situation in the Outer Realm would undergo a historic change. Many elders believed that the Outer Realm was about to face an unknown calamity with regards to the general gist of these words. In the past 100 years, mysterious beings had appeared in the Outer Realms several times. In addition, there seemed to be some turmoil in the Other Realm. The forbidden lands of the outer realm could lead to the other realm. They all guessed that the races of the other realm would use the forbidden lands to head to the outer realm. The star map lock had 9 locks, which represented 9 talismans. When the 9 talismans of the star map lock were all activated, it could suck in the invading creatures of the outer realm. Whether it was the races of the other realm or other species, they could all be absorbed. The various sects were well aware of the function of the star map lock, but they were unwilling to confess it to each other. They all wanted to use it for themselves. Only by grasping the initiative would one be able to stand as the most absolute overlord in the outworld realm. Moreover, the various sects knew that the star map lock was in this moving mystic realm. Thus, the various sects sent people to search for clues about the star map lock. The 4 great sects, the Heaven Origin Palace, the Everlasting Pavilion, the Firmament Sect, and the Qing family, all wanted to become the overlord of the outer realm. This time, they even sent their outstanding disciples to search for the star map lock. As everyone knew, the sealed mystic realm was constantly moving. Because of the constant movement of the mystic realm, the spatial layout of the mystic realm had also changed. After the news of Kong Shin-mu deciphering the ancient desolate city's formation spread, the location of the star map lock was basically confirmed. The star map lock existed in the deeper parts of the mystic realm, which meant that it was further away from the exit. The sealed mystic realm had more than one entrance. Every entrance would appear, but there was only one exit. After all the entrances were closed, the exit would appear. The exit would only exist for 3 days before it would close again. At that time, the mystic realm would continue to move to the next plane before the exit would open again. In principle, the time to search for the star map lock was very tight, so there couldn't be any mistakes. However, the people of the 4 great sects knew that there were still a few entrances to the mystic realm that had not closed. If the entrances were not completely closed, the exits would naturally not open. In this way he had more than enough time. When they passed by the ancient desolate city, they all slowed down their pace and watched from afar with the attitude of watching a show. Of course, the most important thing was that in order to reach the location of the star map lock, they had to pass through the ancient desolate city. There was more than one exit in the ancient desolate city. There was another exit, which was like a barrier. Only after passing through that door would they truly enter the sealed mystic realm. As for the star map lock, Kong Shin-mu didn't know much about it. He only knew that with the star map lock, he could easily carry the heart-devouring blood centipede. Ever since they entered the mystic realm, there had been no news of Ao Tong's puppet. Kong Shin-mu also planned to find Ao Tong's puppet after solving the matter in the ancient desolate city. Of course, they had to solve the problem in front of them first. Tang Xiaoyu, you're not dead yet? At this moment, a sharp voice came from the left side of the crowd. Then, a beautiful figure wearing the Everlasting Pavilion's uniform came over. It was Gu Feng. As soon as Gu Feng appeared, her eyes fell on Tang Xiaoyu. What made her happy was that Kong Shin-mu, who had the Great Demon Seal of 10 Directions, was also here. Gu Feng wasn't interested in the 7 Devouring Demon Seal, but she was interested in the Great Demon Seal of 10 Directions. With the Great Demon Seal of 10 Directions, she could inherit the sex inheritance. People like you who only know how to use brute force are still alive. How could I, who has an invincible movement technique, die? Tang Xiaoyu curled his lips and said lightly. He gestured for Kong Shin-mu and Mo Ya to leave from the back. Kong Shin-mu understood. He knew that staying here would only attract more trouble, so he left with Mo Ya. Hey, stop right there. Gu Feng was still thinking about Kong Shin-mu's Great Demon Seal of 10 Directions. Naturally, she wouldn't let go of Kong Shin-mu. He leaped forward, but was stopped by Tang Xiaoyu. Your movement technique is not good enough. Tang Xiaoyu mocked Gu Feng mercilessly. You should go back and practice more before coming here to learn how to dig for treasures. Since you want to die so much, I'll fulfill your wish. Gu Feng swung her lily-white hand, and a blood mark appeared out of nowhere. She swung it at Tang Xiaoyu. Chapter 56-88. Tang Xiaoyu's body flew straight out, brushing past Dan Yuanfei, and fell heavily on the walls of the ancient desolate city. A large part of the city wall collapsed instantly, and Tang Xiaoyu flew into the ancient desolate city. Dan Yuanfei? When Tang Xiaoyu saw Dan Yuanfei, he suddenly had an idea. Since Dan Yuanfei appeared in the ancient desolate city, it could only mean that the location of the star map lock had been confirmed. Tang Xiaoyu originally planned to find Kong Xinmu and then slowly look for clues about the star map lock. Now, it seemed that he didn't need to look for clues anymore. Without thinking, he entered the depths of the ancient desolate city. Dan Yuanfei glanced at Tang Xiaoyu, then her gaze fell on Gufeng, who was chasing after Dan Yuanfei. At this moment, Gufeng was very unhappy. It wasn't easy to get the 10-directional devil seal, but Tang Xiaoyu, this bastard, actually messed it up. What was even more hateful was that Kong Xinmu had disappeared without a trace. Tang Xiaoyu came and went without a trace by relying on the 10,000 Elephants origin superposition technique. Even so, with Tang Xiaoyu's level, using the 10,000 Elephants origin superposition technique was bound to leave traces. How did Kong Xinmu manage to come and go without a trace? Kong Xinmu and Emoya had already left the entrance of the ancient desolate city. However, during this process, Kong Xinmu discovered a strange thing about the ancient desolate city. The aura of the ancient desolate city seemed to be different from the outside world. The entire ancient desolate city was more like a barrier. To be precise, it was more like a special space. The seal was a moving secret realm. When the secret realm moved, it would inevitably cause a certain change in the space. The spatial distortions were basically concentrated in the ancient desolate city, causing the space around the ancient desolate city to be different from the ordinary space. It could be said that the ancient desolate city was equivalent to another secret realm within a secret realm. Senior Emoya, I sense that there is something wrong with the space of this ancient city. Should we go and take a look? Kong Xinmu pointed to an approximate location. Emoya looked in the direction of Kong Xinmu's gesture. Her beautiful eyes slightly narrowed, and a faint white halo flashed in them. The strange things in the space could be seen clearly. Emoya gently nodded her head. Actually, Emoya had a question in her heart. During this time, there were more and more cultivators gathering around the ancient desolate city, but most of them weren't here for the fragment of the 7 devouring devil sealing art. Could it be that this ancient desolate ancient city had other mysteries? What Emoya really cared about was that she had heard about the Star Atlas lock when Kong Xinmu had been trapped in the array formation. Could it be that the secret of the Star Atlas lock lies in the ancient desolation city? The two of them flew in the direction of the spatial distortion. By the way, Kong Xinmu, where have you been these days? Emoya was still unable to let go of this matter, and she hesitated for a moment before asking. The other world was an extremely dangerous world, at least for the current Kong Xinmu, it was very dangerous. Senior, I wonder if you've heard of the other world? Kong Xinmu did not intend to hide anything from Emoya, so he told her everything that had happened on the battlefield. He included the fact that Lang Zhonghong's armor was a contract artifact that could summon creatures from the other world, and that Lang Zhonghong's life force was maintained by the flame of undead spirits. As for the words that Lang Zhonghong had said before he disappeared, it was worth Kong Xinmu to ponder over. The most important thing right now was to become stronger. Emoya listened to Kong Xinmu's narration, and her heart was filled with sweat. The reason why I was able to escape so quickly is naturally because of Senior's help. Jiang Shenwu smiled, calming Emoya's emotions. Emoya was slightly stunned when she heard this, and then she smiled gently. There's one more thing. When Kong Xinmu caught a glimpse of the Everlasting Pavilion's disciple not far away, he suddenly thought of the 8-God star plate. He generously took out the 8-God star plate. Isn't this the artifact of the Everlasting Pavilion's disciple? Emoya blinked her beautiful eyes in confusion. It's the artifact of the Everlasting Pavilion's disciple, Star Devourer. Kong Xinmu handed the 8-God star plate to Emoya. Just as Emoya was about to take the 8-God star plate, she felt a powerful force from it, along with a burning sensation. What was strange was that there was also a sense of coldness in this burning sensation. Otherwise, Emoya's hand would have been burned by the divine power protecting her. Kong Xinmu also quickly noticed this and hurriedly took back the 8-God star plate. Senior, is your hand all right? Kong Xinmu was very confused. It's fine, Emoya said gently. Then, a pair of beautiful eyes fell on the 8-God star plate. This is the 8-God star plate? Emoya had seen Hai Fan use Star Devour before, but she could not tell what it was. Now that she saw it in Kong Xinmu's hands, she realized that Star Devour was actually the 8-God star plate. She could not help but secretly sigh at the strength of the Everlasting Pavilion. They actually had the 8-God star plate. Yes, it's the 8-God star plate. Kong Shinmu looked at the 8-god star plate and realized that the flame of undead spirits had unknowingly possessed the 8-god star plate and left a mark on it. Kong Shinmu circulated his power and sensed the flame of undead spirits. The flame of undead spirits still existed in the extreme 10 devil seal. When it sensed the flame of undead spirits, the mark on the 8-god star plate would flash. Kong Shinmu also realized that he could summon the flame of undead spirits through the mark on the 8-god star plate. He remembered that he had absorbed 9 types of supreme divine power in the blood mist in the dragon demon cave. First, he comprehended the power of the supreme divine fire, then the power of the supreme mysterious iron. After comprehending these 2 supreme divine powers, it was equivalent to these 2 supreme divine powers belonging to Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu could then use these 2 supreme divine powers as he pleased. As for the remaining 7 supreme divine powers, Kong Shinmu was still unable to comprehend them, so he could not accurately sense their existence. He could only vaguely sense the existence of the 7 supreme divine powers in the extreme 10 devil seal. The situation with the flame of undead spirits was an accident. Originally, he thought that he could only use the extreme 10 devil seal to suppress the flame of undead spirits. He did not expect that the 8-god star plate could also suppress it. From the looks of it, the flame of undead spirits had also become one of the contracted beings of the 8-god star plate. Even so, Kong Shinmu did not dare to release the main body of the flame of undead spirits from the extreme 10 devil seal. If something were to happen, everything he had done before would be in vain. It's the 8-god star plate, but it seems to be lacking a foundation. Emoya tilted her head and saw the flaws of the 8-god star plate. Yes, when I got it, it was lacking a foundation. My guess is that if I want to find the foundation of the 8-god star plate, I will need to go to the outer domain. Hai Fan was a member of the Everlasting Pavilion in the outer domain. The clues of the 8-god star plate's foundation could only be found from the origin of the 8-god star plate. The 8-god star plate is a type of summoning magical tool. Apart from being able to form a contract with a living being, there is still a part of the foundation hidden within. Chapter 56-89. It's okay. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future. Kong Shinmu smiled casually. Yeah. Emoya's gentle smile was tinged with helplessness. Now that Kong Shinmu had the 8-god star plate, Hai Fan, the disciple of Wuji Pavilion, was most likely dead. Whether Hai Fan was killed by Kong Shinmu or not, in the eyes of outsiders, Kong Shinmu was the guilty one. However, before the opportunity comes, there may be a big problem, Kong Shinmu said resentfully. Kong Shinmu didn't need to say it. Emoya had already expected it. The big problem was naturally the Wuji Pavilion. Let's go and take a look, Emoya said softly. Okay. Kong Shinmu and Emoya were outside the ancient wilderness ancient city. The two of them sensed the strangeness of the ancient wilderness ancient city. They quickly flew in the direction of the distortion of space. At the same time, Tang Xiaoyu flew in the direction of the distortion of space in the ancient wilderness ancient city. Tang Xiaoyu's perception of the distortion of space was not very strong. He only noticed it when he used the manifestation essence superposition technique. The cultivators gathered in the ancient wilderness ancient city also flew into the city one after another. Of course, some cultivators still chose to wait and see, or planned to enter the secret zone in the ancient wilderness ancient city from outside the city. In a corner of the ancient wilderness ancient city, Grasshopper stood on a tall pavilion and coldly glanced at the people who were heading to the ancient wilderness ancient city. He glanced at the many cultivators outside the city and finally fixed his eyes on Kong Shinmu and Emoya. Grasshopper glanced at Kong Shinmu and basically understood Kong Shinmu's current cultivation situation. He was a little surprised. When he first met Kong Shinmu's supreme divine power was only at level 6. After obtaining the 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demon sealing technique, it reached level 7 and showed signs of breaking through to level 8. No wonder Emoya chose to come here with Kong Shinmu. The inheritor of divine power had a good eye. At the very least, the person he had chosen wasn't lacking in talent. However, with the 8th level of supreme divine power, not to mention facing the Wuji Pavilion in the outer domain, he might not even be able to walk out of the sealed secret realm. Qing Fu withdrew her gaze and descended. Like an ordinary cultivator, she slowly walked in the direction of the crowd of cultivators. The enchantment that enveloped the ancient desolate city was broken because of General Lung Chonghong's death. As the barrier disappeared, the true appearance of the ancient desolate city was revealed. The layout of the ancient desolation city was complicated. Whether it was the area it occupied or the scenery it displayed, it was much more spectacular than before. Some people guessed that this was the real desolate ancient city. After all, the ancient desolate city itself was equivalent to a secret realm. The ancient desolate city that appeared before everyone's eyes was only the graveyard of General Leng Changhong. Such speculation was not groundless. The perished, the puppets in the city, the battle formations, and many other existences were more like the graveyard of Leng Changhong's generals. Of course, whether or not these powerful existences existed to protect Leng Changhong's graveyard was only the speculation of the major cultivators. There was only one thing that only Kong Xinmu could be sure of. Leng Changhong wholeheartedly wanted to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art. In order to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art, Leng Changhong did not hesitate to pay any price. A generation of generals paid such a huge price to destroy the 7 devouring demon sealing art, which undoubtedly added a mysterious color to the 7 devouring demon sealing art. The most important thing was the spirit of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, Fengling. In addition, Fengling could summon the divine light from a distance. This was what Kong Xinmu was afraid of. Only by finding the complete 8-god star plate could he completely control the 8-god star plate. Before that, he still needed a star map lock. Kong Xinmu and Mo Ye were outside the ancient desolate city. Along the walls of the ancient desolate city, they flew to the place where the space was distorted. The two of them had a general understanding of the area of the ancient desolate city. The ancient desolate city was much larger than they had imagined. The two of them spent a total of 4 hours before they arrived at the place where they sensed. And this place did not seem to be the end of the city wall. Looking along the city wall, it seemed that there was still a long way to go. Senior, I feel that this place is like a unique space. Kong Xinmu's perception was much stronger than before. In addition to the perception of the supreme soul power, he felt that this small space they were in was a unique space. In this small space, there must be a place similar to a door that could be used to enter the place where the cultivators wanted to go. The ancient desolate city was just an ordinary ancient city. The reason why it attracted so many cultivators was because of the existence of the 7 devouring demon sealing art fragment. And the cultivators who came for the 7 devouring demon sealing art fragment were all buried in Leng Changhong's battle formation. The cultivators who came later were not here for the 7 devouring demon sealing art fragment. Their goal was most likely the same as Tang Xiaoyu and Gu Feng. After Kong Xinmu broke through the battlefield domain, he appeared in an unfamiliar ancient city and heard about the star map lock. Presumably, the people who came here were here for the star map lock. Senior, you said that the star map lock can contain the heart-devouring blood centipede, right? Thinking of the star map lock, Kong Xinmu asked. Yes, it can contain the heart-devouring blood centipede. Mo Ye's beautiful eyes blinked. She seemed to have thought of something and said softly. In principle, the heart-devouring blood centipede also has vitality. The star map lock can contain the heart-devouring blood centipede, which is equivalent to being able to contain any living creature with vitality. The two of them sized up this small space as they spoke. After searching for a while, they suddenly found that they were trapped in this small space that could contain 5 people. There was nothing unusual around the space, but they could not take a step out. Is the star map lock appearing? Kong Xinmu said casually. It should be. Mo Ye nodded. Suddenly, Mo Ye seemed to have thought of something and her beautiful eyes focused. Kong Xinmu. She called out to Kong Xinmu. Kong Xinmu immediately understood. Senior, don't worry. I found the exit to leave this place. Kong Xinmu did not hold back and released his supreme soul power. He had found the way out of this small space. As long as he flew off the ground, he could use the power of space to leave this place. The strange thing about them being trapped here was the ground under their feet. The space was distorted because of the power from underground. The place where they were standing happened to be on the passage to the secret realm. Since the entrance to the secret realm in the ancient desolate ancient city had been opened, the passage also opened. Someone is coming. Mo Ye's beautiful eyes focused, glancing at a place on the city wall. A moment ago, it was still the city wall. As soon as Mo Ye's voice fell, the city wall disappeared, revealing the inside of the ancient desolate ancient city. The layout of the city was somewhat familiar to Kong Xinmu. It was not much different from the ancient city he had stayed in before. Don't just stand there. Let's go. Chapter 5690. Senior, this is the entrance. It's not the exit. Kong Xinmu reacted in time. Just now, Emoya suddenly called out to Kong Xinmu. Kong Xinmu thought that Emoya did not want to get involved and wanted to leave this place. It was not easy to find the exit. Emoya actually took the initiative to enter the secret realm. It truly caused Jiang Xinwu to be unable to recover from his shock. Okay. Emoya said gently. Kong Xinmu was stunned at first, but then he followed Emoya. He understood what Emoya meant. Since they were already here, they had to give it their all. After Kong Xinmu and Emoya entered the entrance, a large number of cultivators gathered. There was one person who arrived at the entrance one step ahead of the rest. It was Tang Xiaoyu. Tang Xiaoyu did not even look at him as he entered the secret realm. When he first came to the sealed secret realm, he had a very clear purpose. He would not interfere with the 7 devouring demon sealing arts remnant. Even if he obtained it by chance, he would not accept it. At this time, the secret realm in the ancient desolate ancient city had opened. Tang Xiaoyu adhered to the principle of first come, first served, and did not hesitate at all. The entrance is open. Someone shouted loudly. However, a large number of cultivators gathered at the entrance. They maintained a certain distance from the entrance, but no one went forward. The cultivators who came here all had level 6 or even higher supreme divine power cultivation base. Everyone wanted to obtain the treasures in the secret realm, but they were clear about the dangers in the secret realm. Thus, no one was willing to be the first to stand out. Gu Feng followed Tang Xiaoyu's traces all the way here. After searching for a while in the crowd, she did not find Tang Xiaoyu's aura. Thus, she also entered the entrance. This action startled Dan Yuanfei. Dan Yuanfei, who followed the crowd, frowned. He did not care about anything else and followed Gu Feng's footsteps. Seeing that the Everlasting Pavilion's disciples had entered the secret realm, the cultivators at the back also gathered at the entrance one after another. At the entrance of the secret realm, Kong Xinmu and Emoya were the first to enter. Indeed, it did not go smoothly. Not only were there many entrances, but there was also a faint layer of mysterious white mist floating in them. There was a cold feeling in the white mist. At first, Kong Xinmu thought that it was the Supreme Holy Ice Domain. However, he soon realized that the Supreme Holy Ice Domain was actually repelling this power. If he wanted to know what kind of power this was, he could only devour it directly. Space rules. Just as Kong Xinmu was about to devour the mysterious white mist, he suddenly heard Emoya speak. Space law. Kong Xinmu was astonished. This white fog was actually the law of space. Even Kong Xinmu found it hard to believe that it was the power of space, let alone the laws of space. Ever since Kong Xinmu stepped into the supreme level, he had seen all sorts of godly powers, but he had never come into contact with the power of space. More accurately, it was the supreme power of space. There was still a certain gap between the supreme spatial energy and the spatial energy. Before a cultivator stepped into the supreme stage, even if they were at the peak of the supreme god stage, the power of space they grasped was just pure space power. They could use the power of space to fight, or shrink the ground to inches, and many other methods. In essence, they were just using the power of space to make use of the power of space for a short period of time. After stepping into the supreme stage and grasping the supreme power of space, they could seize the power of space. In essence, it was taking away the power of space, or even the power to create space. Of course, it did not mean that with the supreme power of space, one could take away the power of space or create the power of space. In order to reach this level, one needed to have a strong understanding of the supreme power of space. Supreme cultivators who had reached the 6th level of the supreme power of space could seize the power of space and make it their own power. They could then use the corresponding supreme martial skills. Supreme cultivators who had mastered the 9th level of the supreme power of space could create the power of space. The power to create space was equivalent to opening up an independent space, similar to the existence of a secret realm. It was not an exaggeration to say that such an existence could instantly kill all the cultivators who came here. They had not even met a supreme cultivator who had the supreme power of space, let alone seen the rule of space. The rule of space was the power that could only be controlled by someone who had reached the 10th level of the supreme power of space and understood the rule of space. Although the fog in the passage was thin, it was too thick to say that it was the rule of space. Like Kong Shin-mu, Emoya was very surprised. Her beautiful eyes stared at the white fog that floated in front of her from time to time. Emoya's supreme power was special. Although she had not stepped into the door of the rule of space, she could sense part of the rule of space. Of course, it was related to the second cultivation method that Emoya cultivated. Emoya was also very surprised to see the rule of space here. She would not be so surprised if she only saw the supreme power of space. Emoya released her power to sense again. It's the natural power of the supreme power of space, Emoya said softly after sensing again. The natural power of the supreme power of space was the supreme power of space that had not been understood or controlled. It was like the spirit chi that existed in the air. Take Kong Shin-mu for example. The first type of supreme power that Kong Shin-mu had comprehended was the power of the supreme power of fire. The power of the supreme power of fire that he had comprehended came from one of the 9 types of supreme power of the bloody fog in the dragon demon cave. Before Kong Shin-mu had devoured the power of the supreme power of fire, the power of the supreme power of fire existed in the bloody fog. Under such circumstances, the power of the supreme power of fire was the power of nature. Kong Shin-mu had devoured the bloody fog and comprehended the power of the supreme power of fire. Therefore, the power of the supreme power of fire belonged to Kong Shin-mu as a cultivator and belonged to Kong Shin-mu. Only the power of the supreme power of fire in the bloody fog was controlled by Kong Shin-mu. There was still the power of the supreme power of fire in other places. The power of the supreme power of fire that existed in other places was comprehended by the cultivator and belonged to the cultivator. Cultivators who had mastered the power of the supreme power of fire could control all the flames in the world like Kong Shin-mu. The power of the supreme power of fire that had not been comprehended by the cultivator was still the power of nature. From a certain point of view, the supreme power that belonged to the power of nature was a type of cultivation element. To the cultivators of the supreme power, the majority of the cultivation elements were not controlled by one person, but by multiple people. Simply put, one type of cultivation element could be comprehended and controlled by different cultivators at the same time. Of course, this was not the case for all cultivation elements. There were also some cultivation elements that could not be comprehended and controlled by multiple cultivators. Currently, all the cultivation elements that Kong Shin-mu had come into contact with were multiple cultivation elements. Hearing this, Kong Shin-mu tried to sense the misty white fog in front of him. Chapter 5691. This supreme spatial power of nature contains part of the laws of space, Emoya said gently. That's right. Kong Shin-mu's understanding of the laws wasn't comprehensive. He had to rely on the 7 devouring demon sealing art to identify the power of the laws. The power that the 7 devouring demon sealing art could devour was definitely the power of the laws. The power that the 7 devouring demon sealing art rejected was definitely not the power of the laws. With a thought, Kong Shin-mu activated his devouring power. Now that his devouring power had been refined by the 7 devouring demon sealing art, the power it could devour was far from what it used to be. Kong Shin-mu. Wait a moment. Emoya knew that Kong Shin-mu's strength had increased tremendously after the battle in the battle formation. However, the power in front of him was still the supreme spatial force and the laws of space. Although the power of the laws of space was weak, the laws weren't something that Kong Shin-mu could control at the moment. Senior, my devouring power has improved and can devour these powers. Kong Shin-mu smiled. Every cultivator wanted to obtain great power. On the path of cultivation, it was normal to take risks. Most of the time, they would be risking their lives to cultivate. Emoya didn't say anything else and just released her divine power. Once Kong Shin-mu made any mistakes during the devouring process, she would stop Kong Shin-mu from continuing to devour these powers. Kong Shin-mu activated his devouring power. His devouring power was like a prey that smelled food. It instantly swept out and soon covered the many forks in the road. After the devouring power covered the floating white mist, Kong Shin-mu could clearly feel the supreme spatial force. The reason why this passage looked so complicated was because of the supreme spatial force's nature power. The supreme spatial force's nature power that existed in this passage hadn't been comprehended by any cultivator. It had existed here since the birth of the mystic realm. After a long time, the supreme spatial force had divided this passage into countless passages. As long as he absorbed the supreme spatial force's nature power floating here, he would be able to see the correct passage. Kong Shinmu increased his devouring speed. Kong Shinmu quickly finished devouring the natural force of space. After devouring it, Kong Shinmu realized that his supreme spatial powers were unable to enter the extreme 10-directional devil seal. In this way, if he couldn't comprehend and control the supreme spatial energy that was being devoured, it could only exist in the devouring power. Moreover, the devouring power could not accommodate the supreme spatial energy all the time. Kong Shinmu could clearly feel that the supreme spatial energy that had been devoured was slowly dissipating. As time passed, the supreme space force of nature would definitely run out. What Kong Shinmu couldn't understand was that the great 10-directional devil seal couldn't contain the supreme power of space and nature. The great 10-directional devil seal could even contain 9 types of supreme god powers, and those 9 types of supreme god powers were very heterogeneous. The 10-directional devil extreme seal could contain all kinds of supreme divine powers, but it couldn't contain the supreme spatial power that had already been confirmed? Senior, the supreme spatial power can't be comprehended and controlled by multiple cultivators, right? Kong Shinmu thought for a moment and asked. At the same time, he sensed the supreme space force's nature power that existed in the devouring power. As this supreme spatial power hadn't been comprehended yet, it was very flexible and couldn't be confined by the devouring power. Most importantly, the devouring power couldn't devour and refine the supreme spatial power. Even if the devouring power couldn't completely refine ordinary supreme god powers, it could still refine part of the power. But when it came to the supreme spatial power, not only couldn't it be refined, but it was also dissipating. Seems like it. Emoya wasn't very sure about this. Emoya sensed the supreme spatial power that floated around Kong Shinmu and realized that it was still the power of nature and didn't belong to Kong Shinmu. The power of nature that condensed around Kong Shinmu was more concentrated, and Emoya sensed the space rule within it. Kong Shinmu, I remember that the 7 devouring demon sealing art can devour the power of laws. Try and see if you can devour these laws, Emoya said. Kong Shinmu listened to Emoya's words very seriously. He was very sure that Emoya was talking about these laws, and not the power of laws. Laws and the power of laws didn't sound very different, but the difference in essence was like heaven and earth. Laws were also a kind of power, similar to the supreme god powers of supreme cultivators. Every cultivator who stepped into the door of rules could condense the laws that existed in space and comprehend the power of laws. The power of laws that one could comprehend depended on one's own supreme god powers and supreme god powers. Fundamentally speaking, the power of laws that a cultivator could control was the talent that the cultivator awakened at the beginning. Laws were equivalent to a cultivator's talent. When a cultivator awakened different talents, they could step into the door of cultivation. The power of laws was equivalent to talent. Condensing and refining the laws, and gradually comprehending the power for one's own use, was the power of laws. The supreme natural power of space that floated in these passageways contained only nomological power, not spatial nomological power. When a supreme cultivator's supreme divine power reaches the 9th level, the supreme divine power will have a qualitative breakthrough. When supreme god powers were infinitely close to the 10th level, they would have the opportunity to sense the laws, pry into the door of rules, and step into the realm of laws. Some cultivators with great talent and high comprehension could sense the laws at the 8th level of supreme god powers. The elder of the Fu Shui tribe who had a conflict with Kong Shinmu was such a cultivator. At that time, his supreme god powers had reached the 8th level. Not only did he grasp the laws, but he could also control the power of laws. He was indeed very strong. Now, Kong Shinmu's power of supreme god fire had successfully broken through the 7th level and was about to break through to the 8th level. Controlling a certain amount of laws shouldn't be a problem. In theory that was the case, but Kong Shinmu soon discovered a flaw. His power of supreme god fire had reached the 8th level, not the power of space. Devouring the laws was most likely useless. Logically speaking, the 7 devouring demon sealing art should be able to devour these laws. Although these laws belong to the scope of the power of space, it should be able to devour them. Emoya's beautiful eyes stared at the faint mist floating around Kong Shinmu. Although Kong Shinmu couldn't absorb the power of nature from the power of space, it still condensed around Kong Shinmu and didn't dissipate. This was enough to prove that Kong Shinmu definitely had some kind of power that could absorb the power of space. Kong Shinmu, try it, Emoya said gently. I'll try it now. Kong Shinmu had been thinking about why the extreme 10-directional devil seal couldn't absorb the power of nature from the power of space. He didn't notice the power of nature that had been condensing around him. He activated the 7 devouring demon sealing art. This was the first time Kong Shinmu had actively activated the 7 devouring demon sealing art after breaking Lang Zhonghong's battlefield domain. This time, Kong Shinmu didn't see Fengling. Of course, Fengling didn't intend to show himself. After the 7 devouring demon sealing art was activated, the mark on the seal, which was the mark that Fengling had previously possessed, suddenly lit up. However, the light on the mark was much dimmer than before. It could even be said that the mark wasn't complete, with only 2 strokes lit up. Chapter 5692. The moment the 7 devouring demon sealing art was activated, the laws that existed in the Supreme Space Force and Nature Force reacted. Not long after, the laws were completely absorbed by the 7 devouring demon sealing art. The 7 devouring demon sealing art mainly advanced by devouring laws. Not long ago, it devoured the laws of the Water Tribe's Elder, and a small amount of laws in the battle formation. Even so, the 7 devouring demon sealing art still showed no signs of advancing. The laws in the Supreme Space Force were also negligible, so it was impossible for it to advance. However, what surprised Kong Shinmu was the 7 devouring demon sealing art had only devoured a small amount of the laws in the Supreme Space Force and Nature Force, but it actually showed signs of advancing. Kong Shinmu clearly felt the changes in the 7 devouring demon sealing art. The 2 strokes on the 7 devouring demon sealing art completely lit up. The first level of the 7 devouring demon sealing art had reached the peak. The 7 devouring demon sealing art mainly advanced by devouring laws, and it was a kind of art in itself. Now that the first level was completed, Kong Shinmu finally understood the essence of the first level of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. The first level of the 7 devouring demon sealing art was a kind of power that strengthened one's soul and consciousness. To Kong Shinmu, the most obvious point of the 7 devouring demon sealing art's power was the qualitative change of the devouring power. Correspondingly, the power of his devouring power had increased again. Kong Shinmu had a vague feeling that the devouring power had reached an omnipotent level. With a strengthening of the devouring power, the Supreme Space Force floating around him was once again devoured by the devouring power. The 10-directional Devil Extreme Seal was still unable to absorb the Supreme Space Force, but the devouring power could absorb the Supreme Space Force. Unfortunately, after absorbing the Supreme Space Force, the devouring power could not devour anything else. After weighing the pros and cons, Kong Shinmu still chose to devour the Supreme Space Force floating in the passage. In a few breaths' time, Kong Shinmu completely devoured the Supreme Space Force and Nature Force floating in the passage. Kong Shinmu retracted the devouring power. No aura leaked out this time. Emoya sensed the situation around Kong Shinmu's body, but she didn't notice any abnormalities, nor did she notice any leakage of supreme spatial energy. Looks like the devouring power has been strengthened. Kong Shinmu sighed. After Kong Shinmu devoured the supreme power of space and natural power in the tunnel did not return to its original state. It was still as complicated as before. Not only that, but my guess is also wrong. Kong Shinmu supported his forehead with one hand. He had thought that the tunnel would return to its original state after devouring the supreme force of nature floating in the tunnel. Reality slapped him hard in the face. Although the passageways here are complicated, no matter which passageway, they will eventually converge together. The only difference from the correct passageway is that you will encounter some trouble at the other passageways, Emoya said gently. Kong Shinmu also understood this logic. Just as Senior Moya had said, he would encounter trouble in the other passages. He also didn't want Emoya to go through unnecessary trouble with him. Ah! Suddenly, there was a wail from not far away. What the hell is this place? Why can't we go any further? The familiar wail made Kong Shinmu and Emoya unable to restrain their laughter. Although Tang Xiaoyu was a carefree person, his comprehension ability was extremely strong. This could be seen from the 10,000 elephant essence superposition technique that he comprehended in the battle formation. Including the battle with the cultivators in the ancient desolation ancient city, the supreme martial skill that he displayed was very strong. Not long ago, Tang Xiaoyu covered them to leave the ancient desolation ancient city. Kong Shinmu thought that Tang Xiaoyu would use the 10,000 elephant essence superposition technique to leave the ancient desolation ancient city. He didn't expect Tang Xiaoyu to come here. From the looks of it, Tang Xiaoyu's goal was most likely in this mystic realm. Senior. I know. Emoya understood Kong Shinmu's thoughts. When Kong Shinmu called her, she knew what Kong Shinmu wanted to say. She smiled gently. Kong Shinmu remembered Tang Xiaoyu's kindness. After identifying the direction of Tang Xiaoyu's voice, he looked for the passage that Tang Xiaoyu might be in. The two of them walked quickly. Kong Shinmu and Emoya left. After a few breaths, Gu Feng followed closely behind and entered the passage. This bastard. Gu Feng was now very unhappy. Originally, she was about to get the extreme 10-directional devil seal, but she was tricked by Tang Xiaoyu. Since entering the mystic realm, Tang Xiaoyu had repeatedly ruined her plans. This time, she must kill Tang Xiaoyu in the mystic realm. Tang Xiaoyu, who was in the passage, finally found a foothold after falling for a few dozen feet. As soon as he stood firm, he sneezed and faintly felt a chill on his back. What the hell is that crazy woman trying to do? Tang Xiaoyu rubbed his nose, glanced in the direction of the exit, and quickly retracted his gaze. His eyes narrowed, and he locked on to a direction. His figure moved, and he flew in that direction. After a few breaths, Tang Xiaoyu arrived at the exit. Behind the complicated passageway was a desolate land. As far as the eye could see, the ground was covered with white bones. Gusts of wind blew, sweeping up the yellow sand on the ground. Immediately, the yellow sand filled the sky. However, Tang Xiaoyu easily locked onto a direction and quickly flew in that direction as if he was familiar with it. The time that old man mentioned should be 2 days later. I wonder who will be the benefactor that I will meet. Tang Xiaoyu muttered. In his hand was a white bone that looked like a jade scroll. It was a broken bone. This was the broken bone that Tang Xiaoyu had obtained from the forbidden area of Heavenly Yuan Palace. Tang Xiaoyu had met a mysterious old man in the forbidden area of Heavenly Yuan Palace, and he had obtained this broken bone under the guidance of the old man. However, before he could ask the old man what kind of broken bone it was, what it was used for, or what kind of spell it contained, he had been discovered by the people of Heavenly Yuan Palace. Since then, his life as a fugitive had begun. Until today. Some time ago, when Tang Xiaoyu was carrying out an ordinary escape plan, he had accidentally entered this moving mystic realm. While he was surprised, he was also pleasantly surprised. He could search for the clues that the old man had mentioned. At the passage, Kong Shinmu and Emoya quickly arrived at the passage that Tang Xiaoyu had been in. The two walked to the end, but they did not see any gaps. From Brother Tang's shout just now, there should be a gap somewhere in this passage. There was a wall in front of them. Kong Shinmu turned his head to look behind him, and the passage was the same as when they had come, without any abnormalities. It should be. Emoya was also somewhat puzzled. The two stopped where they were for a moment, and then chose to go to the passage on the left. Just like the passage before, there were no gaps in the passage, but there was no exit. Senior, I feel that the two of us might have gone the wrong way. Kong Shinmu looked at the passage behind him again, and then looked at the only passage that had appeared. Chapter 5693. There should be another way. Emoya stared at both sides of the tunnel. She thought for a while and reached out to touch both sides of the tunnel. There was an aura flowing. Kong Shinmu, there are other tunnels on both sides. Emoya patted the wall, but there were no changes on both sides of the tunnel. There were no changes on the tunnel, but it didn't mean that there were no other tunnels on both sides. Correspondingly, Emoya could still clearly sense that there were abnormalities on both sides. Moreover, there was an extremely cold aura that was rapidly approaching. Senior, over here. Kong Shinmu also sensed the rapidly approaching aura. He had fought with Gu Feng previously and experienced the strength of the Scarlet Flame Qilan's bloodline power in the blood scar. The rapidly approaching cold aura was the power in the blood scar. The aura approached from the right, and the two of them skimmed to the left. Kong Shinmu used the Supreme Dragon Martial technique and slapped the wall on the left fiercely. There were still no changes on the wall on the left. The aura from the right was getting closer and closer. Kong Shinmu suddenly had an idea. He put away the Supreme Dragon Martial technique that he was about to use and used the power of the soul. The moment he released the power of the soul, he gathered it and swept it towards the wall on the left. Kong Shinmu could clearly sense that his power of the soul easily passed through the wall and entered the other side. On the other side of the wall was a new tunnel. It was different from the tunnel that they were in. There were several tunnels at the same time in the new tunnel. To confirm his guess, Kong Shinmu put away the power of the soul and released the power of the supreme divine fire. He could still sense the tunnel. In this short period of time, Kong Shinmu also released the power of the supreme meteoric iron and the power of the supreme sacred land. Unfortunately, these two types of power of the supreme divine fire couldn't pass through the obstacles in front of them. This meant that there was no use in using the supreme martial technique here. He could only use the power of the supreme divine fire. According to Kong Shinmu's guess, the power of the supreme divine fire was at least at the 6th level, or even higher. Senior, you can use the power of the supreme divine fire to open the tunnel. Kong Shinmu pondered for a moment and said. Moya nodded. At the same time, she released her supreme divine power. She did not have the supreme divine power of realization. Kong Shinmu could only sense Moya's supreme holy power with his soul consciousness. After not seeing Senior Moya for a while, he could clearly sense that Moya's supreme divine power had grown a lot stronger. The two of them successfully used their supreme godly powers to pass through the obstacles and arrived at another passage. The moment they left, a blood-colored attack rapidly approached. After crashing into the wall, the force was dissipated. Following that, Gu Feng's figure also swept over. Where is he? Gu Feng stood at the entrance of the passageway, looking around with his gloomy eyes. He did not see Kong Shinmu. He had clearly sensed an abnormal aura here just now. Why was it gone now? Gu Feng clenched the blood scar in her hand and waved it at the two sides of the tunnel. The passageways on both sides could definitely be opened by her blood. However, the reality was unexpected. No matter how Gu Feng attacked, she could not open any passageways. In the end, Gu Feng gave up. She looked at the dark passageway again and quickly moved forward. Suddenly, she seemed to have sensed something. She changed her direction and moved backward. After moving for a distance, she flung the blood scar without hesitation. This time, there seemed to be a layer of flame burning around blood scar, emitting a red glow. This flame power directly occupied the passageway and spread out along the passageway. Gu Feng took a step forward and followed the scarlet flame. After taking a few steps, she stepped on air. Her entire body lost its balance and fell rapidly. As she fell, Gu Feng's eyes focused. Without hesitation, she flung the blood scar to the side and followed it out of the passageway. When she reappeared, she was already at the entrance of the passageway. Gu Feng clearly remembered her purpose in coming to the secret territory. However, Gu Feng was a very stubborn person. Since she had her eyes on Kong Shinmu's Supreme 10 Devil Seal, she would not give up until she got it. In order to get the Supreme 10 Devil Seal, she was even willing to give up her purpose of coming here. Whether it was the disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion, the Heaven Origin Palace, the Cloud Sky Sect, or the Qing family, they were all here for the Star Map Lock. Of course, this was only the mission of the 4 sections. Each sect had their own mission. That was the Star Map Lock. In conclusion, the Star Map Lock was a space that could accommodate living beings. In that case, the Star Map Lock could transfer the Star Map Lock, which could accommodate living beings, to any parallel space. There was another name for the Star Map Lock. It was called the Dharma Seal. The Star Map Lock could be understood as the existence of a teleportation array. For cultivators it might not be very attractive. However, the Dharma Seal was different. The history of the Dharma Seal was much older than the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Moreover, the 7 devouring demon sealing art was a kind of spell that only existed in legends. Many people had doubts about the 7 devouring demon sealing art. The Dharma Seal was different. Records of the Dharma Seal appeared in the ancient books of the various sections. The Dharma Seal was passed down. Not only did the 4 sects of the outer region want to obtain the Dharma Seal, but other sects also wanted to obtain it. Of course, apart from the outer region, cultivators from other places also wanted to obtain the Dharma Seal. Among these cultivators, there were also the Demon God Clan, the Talisman Water Clan, the Emperor Bat Clan, and others who had conflicts with Kong Shinmu. The elders and clansmen who had been defeated by Kong Shinmu were the first batch to set off. Their goal was to go to the Mystic Realm. Along the way, they met Kong Shinmu by chance and followed him all the way. They had underestimated Kong Shinmu's strength. Not only did they not capture him, but they also ended up being wiped out. When the passageway to the mystic realm in the ancient desolate city opened, cultivators who came for the star map lock all rushed over. Obtaining the star map lock meant that they were not far from the star map lock. Kong Shinmu and Mo Ya only knew about the star map lock, but they had not heard about the star map lock. The two passed through the passageway obstacles and entered a new passageway. However, the two did not encounter any faults in the passageway, nor did they encounter any other obstacles. Even so, they could not find the exit in a short time. During this period, Kong Shinmu also used his soul consciousness to look for the exit. However, he found that this place was like a passageway that could never be found. After searching for a while, he could only retract his soul consciousness. Suddenly, Kong Shinmu discovered that the supreme space power of nature within the devouring power had some movement. "Senior, follow me." Kong Shinmu sensed the abnormality of this passageway. Following the supreme space power of nature's guidance, Kong Shinmu and Mo Ya quickly arrived at the passageway with faults. Chapter 5694. Senior, be careful. Before he could stabilize himself, Kong Shinmu sensed something strange at the exit. Kong Shinmu took advantage of the situation and brought Mo Ya to the side. At the spot where Mo Ya was standing, several strands of blood qi emerged from the ground and intertwined with each other. Mo Ya was brought to the side by Kong Shinmu, and the strands of blood qi missed. It wrapped around a piece of withered rock at the side, which instantly turned into black ashes. "That's..." Mo Ya glanced at the black ashes. The blood qi that suddenly appeared seemed to have an extremely strong burning power. "It's that Wuji Pavilion disciple called Gu Feng." Kong Shinmu had experienced the power of Gu Feng's blood scar and knew the power of the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline. The power of the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline was the same as ordinary flames. It had the power to burn other things. Unlike ordinary flames, the Scarlet Flame Qilin could burn everything, especially the cultivator's soul and consciousness. "Are you talking about the blood scar?" Mo Ya stared at the black ashes on the ground, where the blood qi was disappearing. As the blood qi was disappearing, it was also burning the ground beside the withered rock. The power of the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline is indeed extraordinary. Mo Ya's eyes flashed as she caught sight of the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline power that was about to disappear. "This Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline power looks very pure," Mo Ya said gently. "This junior thinks so too." Although Kong Shinmu had never seen the Scarlet Flame Qilin with his own eyes, he could more or less tell based on the burning aura of the bloodline power and the damage it could cause to one's soul and consciousness. Kong Shinmu had fought with Gu Feng personally and suffered the attacks of the blood scar before he could tell if the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline power was pure or not. On the other hand, Senior Mo Ya could tell with her naked eyes. This made Kong Shinmu admire Mo Ya from the bottom of his heart. No matter what, the appearance of the Scarlet Flame Qilin's bloodline power at the entrance of the secret realm meant that Gu Feng had been here. "Be careful, the Wuji Pavilion's people are already here." Mo Ya glanced at Kong Shinmu and smiled gently. Kong Shinmu understood. He rubbed his nose resentfully. Senior is right. When Kong Shinmu attacked Hai Fan, he already knew what kind of trouble he would face in the future. The Wuji Pavilion was a sect in the extraterritorial realm. To him, the Demon God Clan, the Talisman Water Clan, and the Emperor Bat Clan were completely unknown opponents. It was even more urgent to find the 8 Gods Astrolabe's base. "Don't worry too much. This 8 Gods star plate seems to be very compatible with you." Mo Ya saw Kong Shinmu like this and smiled gently. "Senior, what do you mean?" Kong Shinmu was a little puzzled. "I know a little about the contract imprint on the 8 Gods Astrolabe. It was reasonable to say that the 8 Gods star plate could only sign contracts with a limited number of living beings. But the 8 Gods Astrolabe in your hand is densely packed with contract imprints, which is enough to prove that it recognizes you." Mo Ya paused for a moment. But that didn't sound right. The 8 Gods Astrolabe was different from the 7 Devouring Devil Sealing Art. The 7 Devour Demon Sealing Art was a special existence. It had a spirit. The 8 Gods Astrolabe didn't have a spirit. At least, the one Kong Shinmu had didn't have its own artifact spirit. Since it didn't have an artifact spirit, it couldn't be said that it recognized it. Mo Ya pondered for a moment and said, "Or it broke through some kind of restriction, so the 8 Gods Astrolabe can sign contracts with more living beings." Senior is right. Kong Shinmu agreed with Mo Ya's words. As far as he knew, the 8 gods' astrolabe had only signed contracts with 5 living beings. They were Lu Zi, Fan, Jia, Shen Guang, and Pe Yuan. After the battle with Lang Chonghong, the living beings that Lang Chonghong summoned from the other world were all suppressed by the 8 gods' astrolabe and signed contracts with the 8 gods' astrolabe. Kong Shinmu didn't participate in the whole process and couldn't interfere. Moreover, he had a feeling that after he obtained the 8 gods' astrolabe, there was a certain gap between it and Hai Fan's Star Devour. Kong Shinmu couldn't tell what the difference was, but he had a subtle feeling. Of course, the 8 gods' astrolabe signing a contract with the living beings summoned by Lang Chonghong wasn't a good thing for Kong Shinmu. After all, there was no good thing in the world to gain power for no reason. Lang Chonghong and his summoning artifact fell into the endless dark abyss together. It was unknown if they had really left this world. No matter what, the contracted living beings that belonged to Lang Chonghong would automatically cancel the contract and return to the other world when Lang Chonghong's body and soul were destroyed. It was indeed incredible to sign a contract with the 8 gods' astrolabe. Kong Shinmu had carefully sized up the 8 gods' astrolabe. He knew very well that the 8 gods' astrolabe signed contracts with Lang Chonghong's summoned creatures, not the 8 gods' astrolabe itself. That could only be the base of the 8 gods' astrolabe. However, he didn't know where the base of the 8 gods' astrolabe was. How could it have such great power? Therefore, the ones who made those living beings sign contracts were the contracted living beings in the 8 gods' astrolabe. Shen Guang, Pe Yuan, or Jia. One of the 3. Of course, this was only Kong Shinmu's guess. As for what it was, he would only know after getting the base of the 8 gods' astrolabe. Kong Shinmu and Mo Ya didn't stay and soon left the exit. The secret realm in the secret realm was similar to the sealed secret realm. As far as the eye could see, it was a desolate place. Senior, this place is so big. Where should we find it? For the first time, Kong Shinmu felt at a loss. The star map lock is a kind of artifact scattered in the natural world. It doesn't belong to any cultivator. Even if it appears in the secret realm, it will be dropped by chance. Mo Ya said gently. Hearing this, Kong Shinmu thought seriously and suddenly had an idea. Mo Ya smiled softly. Kong Shinmu understood what Mo Ya meant. Since it was a natural artifact, it would definitely be in the place where the natural power was the strongest in the secret realm. Kong Shinmu released the supreme soul power and sensed it. He locked on to the direction where the natural power was the strongest and flew over with Mo Ya. Not long after the two left, Gu Feng, who was wandering around, returned. She glanced at the scorched marks on the ground and frowned. Kong Shinmu is in here as well. Gu Feng knew that Tang Xiaoyu had entered the secret realm before her, but she didn't expect Kong Shinmu to enter the secret realm as well. There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. Since you're here, you can stay here forever. Gu Feng sneered. She squatted down and touched the black soil on the ground. Her eyes narrowed and locked on to a direction. At the same time, Dan Yuanfei and the other disciples of the Wuji Pavilion entered the secret realm one after another. Feng, did you see Hai Fan? Dan Yuanfei asked in a deep voice. Eldest senior brother, Hai Fan came to the desolate ancient city a long time ago. He said he wanted to get the fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. Gu Feng said. Why? Didn't he come with you? Hearing this, Dan Yuanfei's face suddenly became gloomy. Eldest senior, I know someone who knows Hai Fan's whereabouts. Gu Feng seemed to have thought of something. She quickly left after saying those words. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.